There we go. Okay. And this will be recorded as well. So we'll post the presentation and the recording on the SEM website. We do want to have audience participation in a couple ways. One, certainly if you're here just as a audience member and not a presenter, and you have questions, feel free to speak up and ask questions. And also we have some people in the room who may not be speaking, but may want to throw in a perspective, like Brad might want to throw in something about international students or something like that. Feel free to do that. This should be kind of a informal dialogue when needed. Zoom, we don't have somebody separately checking the chat, but we will occasionally check it during breaks and then follow up with you if you have questions. Really, the expectations of this is just, again, going back to the purpose, just have an opportunity to have a better understanding of how we use data on campus and how different offices across campus look at data and use that to make decisions, and that we can all learn from that. I also wanted to invite Tammy Yankee, Dean Yankee up here. As you probably know, Dean Yankee and I co-chair the SEM Council. So we have somebody representing the academic side and somebody representing the student affairs or non-academic side on that committee. And so I wanted Tammy to be able to just share her perspective on the value of this as well, and then we'll get started.
So it's really good to see everybody here and to notice that there are several of you on Zoom as well. And I would, not only is SEM, this strategic enrollment management plan, important to student affairs and academic affairs, and you know that we sometimes can be a very, very siloed institution, but we also have computer services here, and we've got others here in the room, and this takes all of us. This is not just it's not just Rob's office, it's not just academic affairs. If we don't work together, none of this is going to happen. So I think the other thing is various parts of the university collect data and we share data amongst ourselves. We don't always understand exactly where it comes from or exactly how it's run, so that it's not always clear what does that data represent. Is it census data? Is it first day of classes data? Is it this? Is it that? So part of this is also to help all of us to understand what's out there and what's the best place to get the data that you need. And maybe you don't figure that out entirely from this data retreat because things are going to go quickly, but at least you're going to know the person to call or the office to call so that you can find out this data that I need. Where is it and what does that specifically represent? So I think this is a really good time for us to be together as a university to look at this information and to think about all of this together. The SEM Council includes people from all over campus. It is not just, it's not just Rob and I, it's not just academic affairs and student affairs, it's the entire campus. So it is important for all of us, and I think this will be a good day.
Thank you.
Yep.
There we go. So these are the topics and the areas that we'll be presenting this morning. I'll be giving a background, some of the information I shared last year, but just general information on enrollment data and reporting, our headcount reports, the different tools we use and so forth. But before that, Jamie from Adult Student Services is going to speak. She's got to leave early today, so we put her in the beginning. But then you can see the rest of the topics that we'll have today. These are in somewhat of a strategic order because of how they some of the topics connect to each other. Beyond that, no particular order. So we'll start with Jamie to share an Adult Student Services perspective, how they use data.
Hey, good morning, everybody. My name is Jamie Ross. I'm the Director of Adult Student Services. So our office works with non-traditional students, veteran students, online students, working adults. And today we are actually out recruiting at Amazon, which is why I apologize for my brevity, but I have to get on the road and get some materials so we can go and talk to some prospective students at Amazon. So this is the head count. You can find it under the non-traditional student profile. And I think Angela's going to go over maybe later some of those specific student profiles that exist. But as you can see, we have had a little bit of a dip in non-traditional student enrollment. We see enrollment increase during periods of high unemployment, recession, when adults are looking at maybe doing a career change or jumping back into school. Recruitment activities. We attend various educational and benefit fairs at local employers in the area. So we've gone to Jack Henry, SRC, Amazon. Because of COVID, those activities have stopped. So we're just now picking up on reconnecting with those employers and trying to get in to talk to their employees to use their tuition reimbursement benefits. We also have made a connection with the Excel Adult High School in Springfield. It's in the MERS Goodwill Center. So the adults high school is for, adult students who had dropped out of high school or did not complete a GED or high set. They have special classes in person for adults who want to obtain their high school diploma. Community college transfer events. We attend those at OTC, Crowder, various different community colleges, and talk to students who are interested in pursuing their bachelor's degree and continuing on to Missouri State. Our office also creates 2+2 plans for community college partners so that the students have something that they can utilize to see a pathway from their 2-year institution to Missouri State. So right now we have about 134 2+2 plans posted on our webpage. And then we take part in Recruit Back or re-engagement initiatives. Return to Finish is a scholarship that was created in fall of 2020. Excuse me. And it was targeted at Missouri State students who left without completing a degree. So we reached out to students who had at least 90 credit hours, 2.0 GPA, and were not in bad debt, and offered them the opportunity to receive a scholarship, $500 if they enrolled in at least part-time. And we saw 53 students take advantage of that scholarship opportunity the first fall, and it increased to 109 students in fall of 2021. And then there were steady increases in both spring semester 2021 and 2022. And then as far as retention goes, we get a lot of help from our partners across campus in terms of getting reports created for us. Ben Metzger has been instrumental in helping us reach out to adult learners who have submitted an application for admission, but for whatever reason, the admission has stalled. So we receive a report every week that lets us know what admissions is waiting on in order to move that application forward. So we reach out via email and phone calls to make sure that these students know why their admission is not complete and what we can do to help them get through that admissions process. And then financial aid. Rob, you get a lot of calls when we start doing this reach out as well. So we have a report that's been built to track students who are admitted but have no FAFSA on file, or adult students who have been selected for verification, which many of our students are selected for verification, and sometimes that confuses them. So we do a manual reach out via phone and email to make sure that students know that they will not receive their funding until these steps have been taken. So many of our students really appreciate that because they are waiting on that award to come through. The top 3 barriers that adult learners present with in terms of coming to college are time, money, and self-doubt. So our office seeks to remove a lot of things that align with some of those barriers or create some of those barriers. And so through the use of data and some of our student services that we've implemented, such as an online calendar, we've allowed our office to be more accessible to adult learners. And then proactive registration contacts made each semester. Thank you, Kelly. We get a report sent in the Office of the Registrar. We get a report sent to us that lists all non-traditional students who have been admitted, are registered for the current semester, but for whatever reason are not registered for upcoming terms. So we make an intentional effort to reach out to each and every one of those non-traditional students to make sure that nothing is preventing them from being able to successfully register for the upcoming term.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah.
So I'm just up here chatting with Teresa about the no FAFSA dashboard.
Mhm.
Who has access to that? Rob, is that something that, for example, in the Title III grant, which we've got goals associated with improving FAFSA, is that something that we might be able to share?
So yeah, the question was, can the no FAFSA data, can that be shared with partners across campus in efforts to reach out to certain populations of students who maybe are admitted or continuing and haven't submitted a FAFSA yet? For example, the Title III grant under Center for Academic Success and Transition. The answer is, it depends, as any good data answer. So anytime we're talking about student information from the FAFSA or whether or not a FAFSA has even been submitted, that is information that's protected under the privacy section of the Higher Education Act of 1965 as amended. So we have to be very mindful of how we're sharing student data. However, if it's for an effort to get students to administer or award federal, state, or institutional funds, then we can work with partners on campus. We have to make that direct connection that this is for the direct administration of financial aid funds, but we can share that data.
Do students themselves have access to it to confirm that their FAFSA has been?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, that is a proactive process they have to take to submit the FAFSA. They receive a student aid report upon completion of the FAFSA, and we send them confirmation that our office has received it as well. And just internally, we have been contacting new admits through the admissions office that they haven't submitted a FAFSA yet. And we've also been contacting our continuing students who haven't submitted a FAFSA yet, but are registered for a future term. But as many players as we can get involved in that process, I think sometimes our voice gets lost in the crowd when we're trying to reach out to the students. So we can get more partners. Again, just making that connection that this is for a valid use of the data, but as long as we can do that, we can incorporate other stakeholders on campus to in those efforts. And I would welcome that assistance.
Thanks.
Yeah, oftentimes when we reach out to students, we ask them, have you checked your portal? Have you checked under your financial aid tab? Have you checked your email for emails from financial aid? Because they're very good about proactively contacting students as well. And oftentimes they say, nope, been too busy, haven't checked. And I said, well, it's probably there, but I'm glad we have you on the phone. Let's go ahead and walk through these things. So they definitely welcome more communication rather than less. And then just some challenges and opportunities. I was talking to Brad a little bit about some of these as well. Recruiting adult learners is difficult. They're not in high schools that you can target. You don't know where they are in their academic journey or their professional journey. Just at Amazon alone the other evening, I spoke with Amazon employees who had their GED or HiSET, were still working on their HiSET, had an associate's degree, had a few credits from 3 different community colleges, and someone who had 2 master's degrees. So those conversations and those recruitment initiatives would look very different depending upon what the student's interests are and what their background looks like. Consistently, we are asked by adult learners for increased flexibility. Is this program offered in a different modality? Can I complete this program half online, half seated? So these are the types of questions that we're being asked repetitively from our adult learners. And it's something that we tell them we are working towards, but we also show them our Missouri State Online page, which lists all of our 100% online degree programs, certificates, minors, and master's degrees. So we try to keep that page as updated as possible, and we're hopeful that we'll see some growth in those areas, because as we attend these recruitment events and try to recruit more and more adult learners, we're getting this question asked repeatedly. And then they're also looking for credit for prior learning experiences, and veteran students especially would like to see some additional credit awarded for their experience. That's a typical question that I get asked from our veteran students. And then financial assistance is priority number one for a lot of our adult learners. Luckily, with initiatives such as the Fast Track Grant, Finish Line Grant, Return to Finish, Return to Learn Scholarship, we have some options to give them, but many of them will not cover the need that a lot of these adult learners present with. And then just to close, recruiting adult learners should definitely be a coordinated and intentional process, just because it is very complex, and we need to be sure that we're meeting their needs and we're supporting their effort to earn a degree from Missouri State. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Good deal. Thank you very much. Okay, so next we'll talk about just this would be ideally kind of what we would start with, just a start high in the funnel on background information on enrollment and reporting, headcount reports, student profiles, etc. So all of you, or at least most of you, are on the distribution list and get the headcount reports I send out about enrollment at certain times, like opening day, census. And if you're not, feel free to email me and I'll add you to that list. But this is mainly about those types of reports and how we get at that data, how that data is stored, the tools we use, that kind of thing, just kind of a 50,000-foot overview of that. So that's funny. I put a subtitle of who was presenting and meant to take it out, but anyway. So first of all, the types of data sources, just so you're aware of kind of where we can go to get data, even if you're not running these yourself all the time, just to be aware of those that you do go to get data for you, or maybe if this is something you want to learn yourself. We have live data and frozen data. And so this terminology, production, ODS, EDW, freeze tables, what these are is production is basically our live data. So we do have ways for our reports to connect to what we call prod or production tables, and they would pull live data. Typically, those reports are more difficult to write. The data structure of those tables just makes some of those queries harder to run or write. And so we typically like to develop reports and queries out of frozen data. The next three are different types of frozen data. There's some overlap between them, but I'll explain what they are. ODS is the operational data store, and that is came with Banner. And it's one of the ways data is stored. And basically what the ODS, how it works is all that production data that's live today is frozen overnight. And tomorrow, the ODS data is what was frozen from today. So every day, ODS turns over and becomes a new set of what yesterday was. And so it's frozen day by day. We have a lot of reports that run out of ODS where we're just trying to find out something that's happening now. It's actually happening not off of live data, but off of what the end of the day yesterday looked like. EDW is another way data is frozen, but it's aggregate data. And basically what it does is it freezes just kind of, again, high level or aggregate data according to scheduled freeze events. So we ahead of time program different freeze events. So for instance, we do a lot of year-to-year comparison. And so if I run a report right now on registration for fall 2022, and it's 14 weeks before the semester begins, we've created an event called 4 weeks out. So we had that event last year as well. So when I run that report off the EDW, I select a semester, fall 2022, and I select an event. So 14 weeks out. And it's going to take this year compared to last year, so we can get that comparison of where we are. So that's how the EDW works. We schedule as many freeze events as we can think of. So we have week by week, we have when registration sequence ends, every SOAR session, any kind of point in time we can use to compare. Now, if we create a new one, we have to remember it wasn't here last year, so it takes a little time to build it up to do a comparison. But most of our freezes we've had there for a long time. And I used headcount reports as an example, but we can use this with admission reports, any kind of aggregate data we have in the EDW. And then freeze tables is kind of like the ODS, except we take certain points in time during the semester and freeze everything that's in the ODS and save it. Because the ODS is turning over every day. But we say, hey, at opening semester, at census 2, at end of semester, a few points in time like that, we say, we want to take that ODS and freeze it and save it. So then I can go back and say, what was the official enrollment for fall 2016? I use that frozen ODS table basically to pull that information. So that is kind of how we store data and how we're able to access it. Secondly, types of reports, and this kind of overlaps, but of course, frozen reports or using frozen data where we use one of those, the ODS, EDW, or freeze tables, depending on what the request is. Dynamic, where we're looking at data that's changing by the minute. We do have, for instance, some registration reports where we need to know if the seats are changing in a class or something like that. Aggregate data, again, that's kind of connected with the EDW, looking at just high level numbers, not digging into individual records of students. We can run student lists where we do look at a list of students and see specific information about them. And then we have standard reports, standard ad hoc kind of go against each other. Standard is reports we have out there that we regularly run, and then we can develop ad hoc reports on the fly when there's new information we need. So I mentioned time frames before. We have the EDW events, we have freeze tables, beginning semester census, census 2, and end of semester. The tools that we use, and this keeps, this is a growing list. There's actually one I should add to this. Argos is the most common tool for running reports, and it's the tool that we implemented around the same time we implemented Banner. And we've been using that tool. We have a huge library of reports. In fact, a lot of times when we get a report request, I assume we probably have the report out there. I just don't know where it is. But we have a lot of reports saved in Argos. Bear Intelligence is kind of a, it's not a tool itself for running reports. It's a library to show you where reports are stored. It's a good resource, but it has been difficult to keep it up to date. So I will admit that there are probably new reports out there that are valuable to different stakeholders on campus that maybe are not in Bear Intelligence yet. We need to work on that. And then there are probably some links that are broken. If you go to Bear Intelligence and click on a link and it doesn't work, email me or one of the report writers so we can fix that. What's happening is it links to an Argos report, but if we've updated that Argos report, the link breaks and we have to put a new link out. So occasionally there's a broken link. We have a data request form on multiple sites. It's on the SEM website, it's on the institutional research website, and probably other sites where if you have a request for a report, a list of students, whatever it may be, you can go to that. We have a group of people, the data report writers that receive that and then work together on who writes that report. And I mentioned the SEM website, the enrollment management website and SEM website are closely connected, and they have several archive pages of reports that we update every fall semester with new reports, mainly headcount reports and profile reports, which we're going to talk about in a minute. Another tool is, what's the name of the dynamic tool? Kristen, what's the one you're?
Dynamic forms? Or are you talking about?
With the dashboards, Power BI.
Oh.
So Power BI is another tool that's we have a license for on campus as part of the Microsoft suite, or at least closely connected. But we now have that tool for different types of visualization. So Michelle's going to share some dashboard reports, and that would be an example of Power BI. We're building some in Kristen's working on some in enrollment management as well. But that is a tool that gives the user the ability to dynamically on a web page go in and drill down in data themselves. And so that's getting more and more popular. If you need help besides the data request form, we do have a QDUG group. I think Teresa's working on maybe some changes and enhancements to that group, but for now you can still email that qdug@missouri-state.edu, correct?
Yep.
And then they also have an Ask the Experts reoccurring meeting on Fridays at 3 p.m. So you can email that QDUG and they can send that QDUG link, email, and they can send you the link to that, and you can join them on a Friday if you're trying to run a report and need some help with that. And then just a few of the standard reports to go over. We have headcount reports, and there are several different types of headcount reports. We have a headcount report by student. And so what this does is by student characteristics, it breaks down our total headcount in different ways. So by student type, by student class, by gender, by race, ethnicity, by geographic origin, and so forth. So this is one of the standard reports that I send out that you've probably seen. We have a student headcount by course. So this shows modalities for courses, campuses for courses, courses divided by course number, and different characters of courses. We have another one by college department and program, where it breaks it down by, as it says, by each program. And then we have a college department course where it breaks it down by courses within each college department. I really think most of the other information here I've gone over on the previous slides, so I'll stop there. But the main reason for sharing that is to let you know that these are the standard reports we have that you often see that I will send out, and also kind of how the data sources work, how we get that information, how it's stored. And then the other standard reports are our student profile reports. We have profile reports where it takes a certain subgroup of students and then gives a profile of characteristics for those students. So our first time new in college or first time freshman transfers, we have a transfer by institution if you want to look at students just from OTC or wherever. One on all undergraduate students, graduate students, underrepresented, military, and non-traditional. So we have profiles on those sets of students. And then we also look at enrollment indicators for future semesters. So some of the things to be aware of, I talked about point in time in that EDW report, where we might look at 14 weeks before the semester, or end of source session 2, or end of registration sequence. Depending on the time of the year, different enrollment indicators have significance or not. For instance, we'll start looking over on the right, you can see the list of indicators. So for instance, housing contracts is on there. Well, we might be looking at applications in October, but we're not really looking at housing contracts in October because we either haven't received any yet or we're just starting to receive them. So the time of the year is a factor. And then we have different systems and reports we use. And that is one of the complexities of growing technology and purchasing new systems, is that you got to try to make the data from different systems work and talk together. So we have a system in admissions that collects applications. We have a banner that has registrations. Housing has their own system. SOAR uses the system with admissions. And so sometimes it's a challenge to get all those in one report, which actually Kristen's working on pulling all that data together. So we will have a dashboard to do that. But right now what we do is collect that information typically on Mondays from the people in those different offices, and then just manually put those in a spreadsheet and look at them together. And then you can see the indicators. We look at registrations, applications and admitted students, enrollment deposits, the student, after they're admitted, they pay an enrollment deposit. They've got to pay that enrollment deposit in order to register for SOAR. We look at housing contracts, SOAR reservations, FAFSA submitted, free applications for federal student aid, and scholarship acceptances. So when we look at all those together, that hopefully gives us kind of an indication of what it's going to look like for the upcoming semester. So that's what we're starting to collect now. And the first week in June is when I usually start distributing some of that information to a wider group as we start getting some of our deadlines behind us and SOAR reservations and pre-registrations for GEP 101 for our SOAR students and so forth. So in a couple of weeks, those should start getting distributed to a wider group. And this is just what last year's indicators visual looked like. Kristen developed this, but this is all those indicators I listed prior to that. This was on March 28th, so it's not up-to-date data, but it shows a fall 2021 to fall 2022 comparison, what the difference is, the percent difference, and then a little visual chart for that. Again, we're working on having this available as a dashboard in Power BI as well, which will be much more dynamic and interactive. And there are a few other reports just to be aware of. We run a net revenue report. For instance, we've been looking at net revenue over the last 5 years and seeing that net revenue has been going down. Our discount rate has been going up at the same time, which means we've been enhancing, and it's not the only thing this means, but we've been enhancing our scholarship program. So in a way, giving more money to students, which has been good, but we're seeing that discount rate go up. Students have a higher discount to attend or pay less, but the net revenue is going down. So we got to balance that out and be careful to not have that trend too far that way. So because net revenue is a big part of enrollment management, we can get students and seats and increase headcount, but if we're doing it in ways where we're discounting the rate so much, we may not be growing in net revenue. So we've got to have a balance of headcount and net revenue. So we have a report. The screenshot on here is an example of the headcount and credit hour production report and how we would select. Actually, this is an example of the third one down the cube, how we would select students for a particular semester, and then we can pick by college, by department, or we can pick all. And then that enrollment queue, and there's a retention as well, allows us to dynamically drag different fields and kind of drill down on, do some cross tabulations on students. We have a dual credit report that gives us information on students bringing in dual credit, where that's from. And then we have what's called Student Tracker. And this is with the National Student Clearinghouse. So most schools in the country submit enrollment reports to a list of their students enrolled to the National Student Clearinghouse. And then Student Tracker, one of their systems, allows us to, these two sub-bullets are the main way we use it. So the first example is it allows us to say, take a list of students who were here the past semester, but not here this semester, and send it to them, and then they can check their system of all enrollment reported to them nationally, send it back and show us where those students are if they're attending another college. So we can see if we've lost students, where they've gone to if they've transferred to another school. There are certainly times when students just stopped going to school, and then we obviously wouldn't see any record for them, or they may be attending a school that hasn't reported to the National Student Clearinghouse, but there's not many schools who don't do that. So that's helpful for us when we take that. Office of the Registrar, so Angela's office, takes that and creates a profile report for every college and sends that kind of in the middle semester after census to every dean, so that they can look at students that were in their college that last semester that did not return and where they went, and different profile data about them. And they also can dig into a spreadsheet with individual records of each student. Then we also do that same kind of thing with students who are admitted but didn't enroll. So we can look at all students who applied and were admitted but didn't choose to go to Missouri State. We can find out where they went. And that way we can kind of see what our top competitors are, where they decided to go. So we use that tool as well as a standard report. So that's an overview of headcount reports and kind of how we get data. What we'll do is Teresa will cover admissions and how they're using data and their new system, CRM Slate. And then probably at that point, it'll be a good time to take a short break. So hand it over to Teresa.
Thanks. All right, good morning, everyone. So thank you all for being here. You've probably heard a lot about Slate over the last year and how that's a new system that we're using that we are really loving, really enjoying. Since we've only been in that system about a year, I don't have a ton of data to show you, but I want to make sure you understand the sort of data we're collecting, when we're collecting it, how we're collecting it. So hopefully you can start turning your mind and get those wheels turning on how you might be able to use that data to have maybe better conversations with students, more meaningful conversations, interactions, as you know, recruitment is more of a campus-wide effort. So I do have to say, most all credit goes to my team members, especially Ben Metzger, Jim Welch, Ty McCoy, and Julie Spinabella. They are really some of the leads for the CRM within our office. So credit to them, but I'm here to really share how it's going so far, what we're collecting, and go from there. So what is a CRM exactly? That's an acronym we throw out a lot. A lot of you may be familiar with it, but just to make sure we're all on the same page. Essentially, a CRM is a product that helps you interact with potential students. If it's used in the business world, obviously you're looking at potential clients, potential customers. What we really want to do is we want to allow the CRM to do some of that heavy lifting for us at the top of our recruitment funnel. So if you look at that recruitment funnel, you'll see we have prospects at the top. These typically are names that we purchase. So we purchase from a variety of sources. The one that we purchase from mostly is ACT. ACT is combined with a number of different organizations over the last few years. So you'll notice I may call it Incura, I may call it ACT, I may call it NRCCUA, but they really all combined. So if I say those words, that I'm kind of using them interchangeably. We do most of our purchasing from them because we tend to be an ACT state. I will tell you though, you know, some people would say, well, the ACT isn't happening as much, not as many students are taking it, and that is true. But one of the companies that they merged with is a company called NRCCUA. That's a company that's been around for years. And what their main proposition was is they would go into schools, they would do student data or student profile surveys for administrators, for principals, counselors, because they don't have the time to collect that data and analyze it. And so sometimes if you'll see a student or a school profile that says, you know, 95% of our students attend college, or, you know, 4% enter the workforce, 95% are taking college-bound curriculum. A lot of times that's because NRCCUA is coming in and doing those surveys for them and allowing the school to use that data. So, but then they turn around and they sell those names after those surveys are taken. So NRCCUA and ACT are combined. We also get some names from College Board, and that is the company that administers AP exams. So any student that's taking those advanced placement courses and testing for them, the College Board administers those, as well as the pre-SAT. We purchase about 120,000 names a year, which some experts tell us is probably a little less than we should be. So we're re-looking at some contracts to hopefully free up some budget to access some more names in the coming years, but that's where our prospects come from. So when we have 120,000 students sitting at the top of the funnel, you can understand why we really need a CRM to get some sophisticated messaging out there to students. Inquiries is really once a student raises their hand. Maybe they fill out an inquiry form, maybe they come to an event, whether that's a high school visit, maybe they do a campus tour, do a virtual event. Anytime they actually interact and raise their hand back to us, that's when they move into the inquiry stage. And then they move down, as you can see, from an applicant to admitted student, deposit, and then hopefully an enrolled student. So at the top of the funnel, they're getting that more general, broad messaging. And as they move down the funnel, that's where we step in and we do more of the one-on-one calling, texting, setting up one-on-one Zoom appointments, those sorts of things. So why Slate? It is considered the industry standard. They work with about 1,500 schools, including some of the top schools in the nation. So we feel very blessed and grateful that we were able to go with that product. It was developed exclusively for higher education. So it's not like some of the other systems that were really developed for the private sector, like a Salesforce product, and we're trying to mold it to fit our needs. So it's truly based for higher education. But several things for us stood out for Slate. One thing, it does have travel management included. That was something that our previous system did not. So we were having, essentially our travel was managed through Outlook calendars, and it wasn't easy to track the students that were coming to events. We couldn't send them effective communication, reminding them about high school visits and those sorts of things. It also holds not just student data, it also holds parent data. But the big plus for us was that it also holds high school and community college partner data. So in the past, we were keeping that information in a shadow database and having to use an additional third-party system to do email campaigns or blast campaigns towards all the high school counselors that we have in our system. Now we can run all of that through Slate and track it. And there's just much better control of the system, and the user experience through the application is significantly improved from our previous system, which is much better suited for the graduate student population. So if you can see it, this is just a couple of student records. We can really track what's happening with students much better. Those who are on Zoom may be able to see this. I assume, will this slide deck be shared afterwards? Yep. Everyone? Okay. So what you can see if you're looking at this, you can see some basic data about the student. Those dots about 2/3 down the way, that tells us the interactions that the student is having with us, excuse me. So on the left-hand side, you can see not much interaction. They weren't doing much until just the last couple months, where the other student has had some pretty consistent communication with us, opening emails, visiting, answering the phone, those sorts of things throughout the entire cycle. And then down at the bottom, you can see interactions. This just shows the 3 most recent interactions. So on the right-hand side, you can see there was a text incoming from the student asking about a SOAR session, asking about housing, and then they actually received a phone call back in late April. So what we say in our office, if it's not in Slate, it didn't happen. So we are doing our best to make sure that we're giving notes and allowing the next person that talks to that student knows what's happened to that student previously. So this is a glimpse of the travel management function. Previously, as I mentioned, all of our campus visits, or not campus visits, I'm sorry, all of our outbound travel. So every time we were going to a high school visit, doing a college fair, that was really managed through Outlook calendars, and we weren't able to get that data back into the system quickly. It was hard to track, hard to follow up with those students in a timely manner for sure. So now we're able to track every event. So I think the busiest day you can see is that this is April 7th. There are several high school visits that day, but then also campus tours. So it manages all of that in one place. And if you look closely, once you get the slide deck, you can even see how many people are attended or pre-registered for that event. What this does too, whenever we're able to track these things, when students call in or when they do an email, we can have those little small interactions that make a big difference. We can say, hey, I saw you visited back in April and you met with the marketing department. How did that go? Or I saw when Emma was at your school last month, you went to that high school visit. Was that helpful? And it's little things like that that can make a student really feel like, hey, they actually know me. They remember me. They understand that I'm interacting with them. And so we are able just to have much richer conversations. And then in terms of the travel management, we can even track because we can input how much we're spending on hotels, how many students are enrolling from certain areas. So we can actually track ROI of certain territories, how we're performing at different high schools in different regions to say, okay, where do we need to step up the efforts? We're getting some traction, or where do we maybe need to redirect or do something a little bit differently? Allowing to track this data also helps us with budget. So what we can do is we can look at previous years and say, this many students we talked to at high school fairs, this is how many students we talked at high school visits, and it helps us manage how many publications we're going to need whenever we're out traveling. So I did talk a little bit about some of the data sources that we have. I talked about the purchases and how we get those through NRCCUA. But I do want to talk a little bit more, obviously, about some of the other data we're collecting. These inquiry forms are completely built from scratch. So even in the last year, we've noticed maybe some blind spots. For the longest time, we were always told, as little information as possible. You want to just get the information. You don't want them to abandon the form. However, we are seeing, or what we've learned, is that more and more parents are involved in the process. And so over the last couple months, we just added in on the inquiry form alone, where we're also asking for parent information. Typically, the first time that we were asking for parent information was at the time of application, but we think we need to get that earlier. Parents are very involved in the process. In fact, 99% of parents through an RNL study have indicated they are very involved in their students' college search process. So we thought we're missing out if we're not asking for this earlier. So now that's on the inquiry form. We've worked with other departments to add like a question about ROTC and things like that. Access programs is on the application, so we can work with Dr. Reed's area. So we're definitely open to adding things and making sure we get data at the right time that helps not just our office, but the campus community talk with these different students better. So obviously the inquiry form, also any event form, we're asking very similar questions. If they're registering for a campus visit, if they are planning to come to showcase or a summer visit day. And actually the application is the first time we hear of a lot of students. This is what we call stealth applicants. If you haven't heard of that, it's students that kind of like to fly under the radar. It's kind of like, think about when you go into a store and an associate immediately pounces on you and you're like, what do you need help with? And you're like, I don't know, I'm just looking. Like, just give me a minute. Let me look around. Or if you go to a website and they immediately ask you for your email address for 15% off, and you know you're going to get inundated with emails. So you say, nope, I just want to look around first. Students are smart. They know why we're asking for their information. They don't want those emails. They want to do the research on their own. They want to talk to you on their own terms. So there are a lot of students that will apply and we have no idea where the student came from. We're happy to have them, of course, but that's what we call our stealth applicants. Also leads through digital ads. This past year, we have done a year-long comprehensive plan with Andrea Mostyn's area in strategic communications, and so we'll get leads that way. I know Suzanne also runs ads year-round, and so periodically we'll get lists from their area so we can input those into the system as well. And then if you are ever hosting like a student event on campus, whether it's a STEM day or a DECA or FBLA conference, we would be thrilled to get that data. Collect it, please, because what we'll do is we will gladly and happily start communicating to those students for you. They will enter as inquiries. So they will automatically go into email campaigns, they'll go into text campaigns, they will get invited to a variety of events if we're at their high school. We have sessions called Missouri State Meetups where admission counselors go and they hang out Panera Bread or St. Louis Bread Co., depending where you're from, and they will sit down and have coffee one-on-one with a student and their parents. So students will start to get invited to those things if we can get that data. They will also be sent several physical mail pieces. So they'll get sent invitations to showcase, invitations to summer visit day. They'll actually get a view book as well. So the things, the bare minimum that we need if you're hosting any of those events is a name, date of birth, email, and then the entry year. So, you know, and if you ask, if they just put sophomore, we'll gladly calculate that for them to figure out what year they're actually going to be entering. But those are the 4 bare minimum things we need to put them into our system so we can start communicating with them. Even better would be, I edited it this morning, but I guess you pulled it up.
Oh, sorry.
I know, no, that's okay. I noticed that typo this morning and changed it on the mailing address. Anyway, a mailing address in high school, because I guess if we don't get that information, we couldn't necessarily send them the view book and some of those paper mailer invitations and things like that. And best would be their phone number. So we can send them text communications, or they can enter calling campaigns and parent info. So we do have inquiry cards that we're happy to provide that you could use at any events that you're hosting, or you can have them do a Google form, or you can just have them fill out a sheet, whatever works for you. We just need it in an Excel sheet, and we can upload it into our system and do some of that heavy lifting I mentioned, or let the CRM do the heavy lifting for us. And then as they move further in the funnel, that's when we're going to step in and do some of the more one-on-one communication. All right, so what is next for us with the system? We are looking to build out better territory management reports now that we have a year of data in the system. Our data has lived in 3 different systems over the last 5 years. So it's really hard to track how we're doing by territory or even by high school. So that's something that's going to be a summer project for our office to get those up and running. I think it's going to do a few things. It's going to allow us to quickly redirect mid-year, even mid-fall, if we can quickly see our applications are down in a certain territory or at a certain high school, and maybe change our outreach, maybe work on the relationship with the counselor in those schools. I think it's also going to give our admission counselors a lot of empowerment. So they're going to know exactly where they're standing, how they're doing in certain schools, and hopefully motivate them and get them excited to maybe try different things and new methods to move their numbers in different ways. Encourage student data mindsets. I'm going to talk about this in just a minute, and I hope this too will get your wheels turned on how you might be able to use this data. This is something that I think is really exciting. And then also finding out what areas we can gain traction in based on our current class. So I think everybody has heard that the demographic cliff is coming, right? And so we're going to actually see a slight uptick in population of high school graduates till about 2027 in the state of Missouri. And then it's going to drop pretty drastically through 2037. So for the next 10 years. Right now, Missouri State's market share within the state of Missouri for Missouri graduates is about 5.4%. So we got to figure out, we have a couple options. We have to figure out how to increase that market share because the number is shrinking. That's going to be really hard to do because clearly Missouri students are pretty mobile. They will leave Missouri. They're not tied to staying in Missouri. So we're not just competing with the Mizzous and the Centrals and the UMSLs and the Drurys. We're competing with one, non-consumption in general, students just not going to college, but also students that are deciding to leave the state. So one way that we are figuring out maybe what other markets we can open up into is by looking at predictive modeling. We partner with RNL, that's Ruffalo Noel Levitz. They are a nationwide company. They do a ton of research, and we've worked with them for several years. And what we do is every year we send them our full year of data. And they look at the students that actually matriculated to the university, and they come up with a score 0 to 0.99. And the students that score higher on that scale are students that are most likely to enroll at Missouri State. Our office uses that a lot because that is how we decide how to manage our budget. You know, where do we need to cut off these students? We're just going to send a lot of email to because maybe they're lower on that RNL scale. These students, we're going to go ahead and continue to send a lot of physical mailers as well. So we use that RNL data. That's something that we can certainly provide to you if you're not getting it. I know right now our departments are getting lists every week that show the new admits. I don't remember if the RNL score is on there. If it's not, we can certainly add it. As we're all, you know, trying to manage limited resources, that RNL score can help you decide if you only have so many calls or so many connections you can make in a day. That can help you quickly maybe prioritize the students that you want to reach out to first. But that predictive modeling also looks at the socioeconomic factors of the area, the students that are enrolling. So it looks at like communities, political climate, the academic major, distance from campus. So there's lots and lots of factors that go into that modeling system. And then I met with Greg Fansler not too long ago and talked to him about where do we already have an alumni presence that hopefully we have some champions from Missouri State out in the field. Not surprisingly, our biggest alumni chapters are right here in Springfield, St. Louis, and Kansas City. The fourth largest is actually down in the Fayetteville, Bentonville area. And I'll be honest, I was a little shocked. We have an alumni chapter with around 800 people in it. And Bentonville, Fayetteville is only about a town of about 85,000 people. So that's a pretty good chunk of their population that hopefully would be champions for our campus and for their experience while they were here. So we are planning this year to give a lot more attention to that Northwest Arkansas area, knowing that there's a lot of families already in the area that are pretty familiar with us. So the encourage data mindsets, whenever a student fills out the ACT or whenever they fill out that NRCCUA survey, what Encura has done is they have come up with what they call 6 student mindsets. I did a screenshot and there's only 3 on here because I couldn't get it to all focus. But so you can see there's their experiential interest, social focus, career through academics. The 3 that I couldn't fit on were career pragmatist, exploration and meaning, and grad school bound students. So if you look, it actually even tells you, for experiential interest, these are students that desire a career and want to get hands-on internships and employment. Where social focus, these students want to gain meaningful friendships, and a job would be nice too. They want to engage in every connecting activity possible, and the social environment is most critical to choice. So it even tells you then the opening conversation, how you maybe want to talk to these different students in different ways, and then what blind spots they might have, if I could scroll down and show you. But what we have in our system in Slate, it allows us to do what's called liquid markup. Essentially, that means whenever we develop these campaigns, even the graphic or the picture that shows, or the first paragraph on that particular email can change based on the data point that we know what student mindset they fall into. So the student that's the social focus, we might have a picture of Bear Bash and talk about opening weekend in that opening paragraph. Where a student that's talking about experiential interest, we might show a student that's in the field student teaching and talk about experiences a little bit differently. So this is going to allow us to talk about students or talk to students in ways that aren't just meaningful to us, but it's hopefully meaningful to them, which is most important. So how you can use our data. So I want to build a relationship with all of our campus partners to where we're really working together to work with students in better, more meaningful ways. I think it should be a symbiotic relationship. When we do better, so do you. When you do better, so do we. So if you have, whether that's athletics, dual credit, whether it's students getting amazing internships out of the psychology department or whatever it might be, those are stories that we want to know about and go out and share with our students and counselors. So I really want this to be a partnership. We can build reports and queries for you. Those can be things that can be sent out weekly, like what we're doing now, or we can build a report within Slate, give you access where you can click on the link and you can check it anytime you want, whether that's daily, weekly, quarterly. While Slate has been our kind of tool along with international programs to kind of build and use, the data is not just ours. We want to figure out ways that we can use this data to benefit the campus community to help enrollment. We would just want to make sure that you have the tools that when, we are asking for your help and talking to students, that you have the best tools to do that. So if you do have interest in any reports, please reach out to me or some of the folks I mentioned earlier. That would be Ben, Ty, Jim, Julie. We can set up a meeting. We can work email. We're happy to work with you to figure out how we can best use this to be a resource for all of us. So that's all I got. Any questions?
Teresa, I have a question.
Yeah.
I know you talked about marketing Springfield as a location in the community connections, and maybe that fits a little bit with the experiential mindset or the practice type student. But what are you doing along those lines, and how does they don't forget to repeat the question for.
Oh, yes. He asked about essentially utilizing Springfield as kind of a selling point, if you will. So we definitely have spreads like in our view book that's specifically about Springfield that we really had them change up a lot. I found in some of the previous iterations of the view book, it maybe didn't talk about some of the things that would have been more exciting to students. And so in working with Amy Schultz area, it talks about like the Cardinals being in town, and we have an esports center down the road, and there's lots of shopping in the Ozarks. So we're really trying to hit on all the different things of Springfield. We also highlight it in a couple of postcards and several emails as well. But in terms of this student data mindsets, this is a new thing. So we haven't built those campaigns. We have a new staff member. Her name is Katie McWilliams. And so she's going to be working on doing a lot of that content for Liquid Markup. She just finished some dual credit campaign, adjusting that a little bit. And she also just finished up a summer campaign that we're doing specifically just for like the 8 weeks of summer.
Do you know how the student mindsets from Incura, is there predicted potential behind those in terms of students most likely to enroll based on those mindsets?
You know, so right now we do our predictive modeling through RNL. And I'm sorry, she asked with the Incura data mindsets, is there a way to predict who of those who would be most likely to attend maybe? So right now we do our predictive modeling through RNL, which is a completely different company. We are looking at maybe going in another direction. Incura does actually offer predictive modeling as well. And so what happens is, I mean, I don't think RNL is listening, but I think there may be a good chance we switch to Incura's product because we can't walk away from Incura. That's where we have to get the bulk of our names. So if we can use them to get the bulk of our names and the scoring, it makes sense. Where right now we have to stick with Incura and RNL is on top of that. So I think it would be interesting. Right now we don't have Incura's predictive modeling, but if we could combine their predictive modeling with those student data mindsets, we just don't have that product yet. But I'm hoping in the next month or two.
So my follow-up is that could be non-cognitive student data that we could use from a retention standpoint.
Right.
So wondering if we continue to use those mindsets, then that could be something that we build into our easy system as
Right.
information to help students.
Yes, of course. I agree. And that's kind of where mine went to. My mind went to is like, great, this helps us get them here. But once they're here, can it help us keep them? I will have to reach out to our Incura rep. I don't know that they have data yet on if it tracks once they're actually into school, or that student who thought they were really socially focused, you know, maybe they actually switch. Yeah, I don't know that they have that data, but I think there could be something there for sure. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. I think a lot of good things ahead with the new CRM and admissions, and hopefully it's helpful to see the type of data that they are working with. You know, it strikes me, and maybe I should have said this in the beginning, but as I'm listening to already just a couple speakers and thinking about who's in the room, that just hopefully an outcome of this is all these different perspectives in the room. So you might, for instance, be hearing about something admissions is doing and go, wow, this is a way my area could collaborate with that, or this is a way my area could use that data, or if I gave this information to admissions that would enhance what they're doing, all kinds of things like that. So I'm hopeful that that's one of the outcomes of this. And if that's something going on in your mind while somebody's speaking, please use the opportunity today to share that. Or if you don't think today is the right time, follow up with that particular person. But I'm hopeful that's part of the reason for us being here together today. So I think we reached a point for a short break. But before that, you want to hear a good dad joke? Well, what's a good dad joke, right? So did you hear about the two people who stole a calendar? They each got 6 months. All right, we'll take a break. It's 9:52, so let's do about 5 minutes. So a few minutes before 10. Okay, we'll go ahead and get started. So our next topic and area is financial aid. Rob's going to talk about student debt data and student employment services as well. We have Cheryl here as well. So thanks to both of you for being here, and I'll hand it over to Rob Moore.
Okay, great, thank you. So just to kind of reiterate, the things that we track for early indicators, FAFSA submission rates, we kind of slice and dice that data along different student types. So first time new in college, continuing transfer. We also look at other demographics such as undergrad, grad, their expected family contribution range. So we can identify just our Pell Grant eligible students, our full pay students, our highest need students who have 0 EFC. So we can kind of manipulate the data that we get so we can see where we are in FAFSA submission rates within those different populations of students, which can be helpful when we talk about the different outreach we want to conduct. So if it's something that you or your office are interested in assisting with that kind of outreach to students and making sure that our admits are filing the FAFSA, we can subdivide that data even more based on college level or different types of parameters that would be within the system already, primarily Banner, so that we can give you, a roster of students that you'd probably have the highest likelihood of making some successful contacts with. So that's one of the things that we can do to partner with that effort. Again, as many individuals as we can get to have help getting students to file the FAFSA. It's mind-boggling how many students are not filing the FAFSA or are waiting till later dates to do so. Nationwide, we're seeing significant declines in FAFSA submission rates. We're also seeing similar declines at the state level. And then of course, our institution, we've seen declines in the number of students who are submitting FAFSA compared to this point last year, as well as this point for the previous 4 years. So it's something that we're trying to turn the ship around on that. But this newer generation of students are waiting longer to submit the FAFSA. They've become disenchanted with the financial aid process in general because the mindset is that they're only going to qualify for loans, and students are especially loan averse nowadays. And so we're trying to communicate that in order to qualify for grants, especially, they need to have that FAFSA on file at an earlier date. But primarily within this presentation, focusing on the sole goal, I can't talk, SEM goal 4, which is financial preparedness. And we're mainly tracking that based on student loan debt at graduation. So that's some of the figures I wanted to share with you. But first, I wanted to talk about Pell Grant recipients and Pell revenue. So we have always prided ourselves as an institution as one that serves high needs students. Specifically, our undergraduate class always hovered around 1/3 of that class was Pell Grant eligible. They received the federal Pell Grant, which is an indication that they have a relatively high level of financial need. Over the past several years, we have seen a significant decline in our student population who are receiving the federal Pell Grant. Some of that can be due to record enrollment, and as those students are working through the pipeline, we're not replacing them with as many students, but we are seeing a significant drop in the number of Pell FitNICs that we're receiving as well. So this isn't, something that it's easy to turn around, but we have placed more of a focus on Pell Grant recipients in communicating with them, the recruiting phase, and as they're here to try to retain them, because that's an important population, because that is a group of students who oftentimes the Venn diagram of Pell eligible and first generation have significant overlap. So we want to make sure that they're not departing the institution due to factors that are controllable on our end. So monitoring this is important because the students themselves, but then also the revenue that they bring in. You can see 17-18, we peaked in the number of Pell recipients, as well as the amount of Pell funding that was dispersed to students within that aid year. We had a pretty significant jump in that year from the previous year, just because that was when the reintroduction of year-round Pell took effect. So students can receive additional Pell money in the summer. So we added another about 6 million or so to that year's awarding amount. But beginning with the 18-19 year, we have seen steady declines in both Pell revenue, as well as the number of Pell Grant recipients. This is just looking at our first time new in college students who come to Missouri State who are Pell Grant eligible. And again, you can see starting fall of 2018, a gradual decline in the number of FitNICs who are Pell Grant eligible who are enrolling at Missouri State. So we're having a gradual loss of that market share. And this isn't just capturing Missouri resident students, but this is all Pell eligible students. So again, it's somewhat of an alarming trend that we've identified, that we're working pretty hard when it comes to how we're evaluating our scholarship resources, how we're outreaching to students, partners on campus that we're working with to try to communicate with these students at all phases of their life cycle or educational life cycle to understand why they might be departing or not choosing Missouri State, and putting different programs or policies or scholarships in place to try to, again, turn that tide around. And I'm just trying to give you a holistic view of what the Pell picture looks like. This is first-time, full-time Pell eligible students, so full-time FitNICs within the state of Missouri, looking at all the public four-year institutions. And you can see, by and large, all public four years have seen a decline in their Pell population, with the exception of University of Missouri Columbia, who have seen a dramatic increase. That increase corresponds with their land grant compact program, where they offered institutional funds that basically fill it in the gap from any other funds, gift aid that students receiving, to pay off all tuition and fees. There is a correlation, not necessarily a causation. The introduction of that land grant compact in fall of 18 is the same semester that we saw the significant decline in our Pell population, and other four-year institutions saw a corresponding decline. So it's safe to say students are departing other public four years, including their own system four years, and going to Missouri Columbia because of that land grant compact. So that has framed a lot of the conversations we have with trying to recruit those students with additional scholarship funds, how we can help backfill some of that financial gap for those students. But truth be told, we don't have the financial reserves that some institutions do. So we have to get creative with how we try to allocate funds, who we identify as potential recipients of new monies. But this is trending that we're monitoring very closely, because it's important to know what that demographic is doing, because it's an important group within the state and the nation. So talking about student loan debt, I'll quickly go through some slides to show you trends on this. And they're mostly updated slides from the previous SEM data retreat. But we can provide aggregate data reports on student borrowing habits upon request. And as I mentioned, we have a number of different variables and parameters that we can apply to the student groups to kind of filter it down to a population that might be of particular interest to you. We can do a lot more with aggregate data than we can do with individually personally identifiable data. So the Higher Education Act, we can't share individual student records with everyone, but we can certainly share aggregate data as long as it's not two students, that then it could easily be identified who those individuals are. But these are the types of things that we have divided this type of information along the line. So racial, ethnic identities, this is all self-reported when we're talking about racial and ethnic identities. So this is information that students are reporting to us either on their admissions app or through other forms that they're filling out at the university. Their level of financial need. So this would be determined by their FAFSA results. We can determine where they would fall within certain categorizations that we establish. Their correlation to U.S. national poverty level. So whether they're at the poverty level, 200% poverty level, we can divide our population of students based on those lines as well. First generation status, again, their college, and then other criteria that might exist in Banner that we could apply those filters to the data. So just at a very high level view, you can see at Missouri State, our students our undergraduate students are graduating with significantly less debt than other Missouri public four years, as well as national average public four years. So that's great. We're bucking the trend in terms of our undergraduates and the amount of debt they're leaving the institution with. Again, I always look for the bad news in a good situation. So this could be directly corresponded to some data we find later on, which is Pell Grant recipients generally borrow more loans. So as our Pell share decreases, the number of students who are carrying higher amounts of loan debt at graduation decrease. So that could correspond to some of these decreases we're seeing in average debt at graduation. So, I always look for the gray cloud inside the silver line. Looking at it through the racial and ethnic lens, we can see that we have seen declines in all groups, but our Black African American students are still graduating with more debt than their peers. And I'll give the caveat again, the Hispanic Latinx group, it's a somewhat smaller population. So we see pretty dramatic swings because from year to year, we might have 27 students in that group, we might have 15. So each individual student can have a greater impact as we have a reduced population in that group. So be mindful of that. And then of course, the institutional average and the white Caucasian average mirror each other pretty closely because the majority of our graduating students identify as white or Caucasian. Pell Grant eligibility, again, as I mentioned, Pell Grant recipients typically graduate with higher loan debt than their peers who are not Pell eligible. So that is something that we want to be mindful of as we're communicating. We work a lot with Kelly's area in working with first generation and Pell eligible students to counsel them on what loans mean, why not to overborrow, what that can mean for them after graduation if they have more loan debt than was necessary. So we're really trying to ramp up and identify these groups of students based on these types of parameters, and that instructs our financial literacy outreach. So if any of your individual departments or offices are looking at financial literacy or preparation, again, we can use this data to help pinpoint how we utilize those resources to do the most good on campus. First generation status, students who are first generation typically borrow more than their non-first generation students. But interestingly, that purple line is the students that we don't know, because again, that's information that they report. So the students with unknown status graduate with more rate than or higher debt than anyone else. So that would be interesting if we could start to fill in some of that unknown data, figure out where those students are falling and how that affects our overall averages. And then finally, average debt at graduation by college. And so what you're seeing on this chart, 0 is the Missouri average or the institutional average at graduation. So what average at Missouri State University undergraduate students are graduating with in terms of debt. So at the collegiate level, this is showing you how much more or how much less than the institutional average students within those colleges are graduating with. So you can see the College of Agriculture has their graduates have typically graduated with less debt than the average at Missouri State University. Conversely, the undergraduate college, so I believe that would be like the general studies degree, they typically graduate with a significantly higher amount of debt, almost $8,000 more in undergraduate debt than the institutional average. So again, if we wanted to use this type of data at the collegiate level or the college level to help inform tactics that we might employ to speak to students within their colleges with their advising centers or whomever, this can be helpful so that we can frame those conversations in a way that are constructive for the students. So now I'm going to hand it over to Cheryl, and she's going to go over some of the student employment figures that we track here.
Good morning. So student employment, we do look at different data tables to kind of determine what do we need to do to market student employment. Student employment is not a given. Students aren't required to get a job. So it's really important. A lot of what we do is marketing. As you can see, the data, it's based off of payroll totals. So it's on fiscal year totals. The current payroll totals aren't available because we're not through that fiscal year. So we're looking at 2021. And then because of COVID, it has drastically impacted student employment. When the campus was closed, obviously students couldn't be working on campus. So I pulled in the 18-19 year to give realistic comparisons. But basically, we also, we process all student employment for West Plains as well. They're included in this table, but for future slides, just know that we can get any of that data that would be needed. If you ever see that you're wanting West Plains data, we can pull that, but I focus primarily on campus in Springfield. So as you can see, during 2021, we've run around 732,000 in work study funding. Budget, we had $4.6 million that we paid out in salaries. For those of you that are unsure or not as clear on what those different categories are, the work study budget is funding that we get from the federal government. We can use that to pay wages for students that have deep financial need. Budget would be salaries that are going to be paid through departmental budgets that are allocated to those departments. We also post for off-campus employers through our FIS app, our federal reporting that we give back to the federal guidelines or the regs. We do have to track any postings and any revenue generated, payroll generated through those postings. Basically on campus, if you're looking at 18-19, we were employing about 3,000 employees on campus and paying out about $6.2 million in wages. For the Springfield total, if you want to include what we do for the off-campus, 18-19, we're running about 9.8 million. When you factor in West Plains, that puts us over at $10 million is what we're paying out for students in those wage categories. So this slide is just looking at on-campus student employment within Springfield. Again, I did a comparison of both 18-19 and 2021, pre-COVID and post-COVID. So what we're seeing is jobs filled in 2021. We were looking at about 2,300 overall. You can see that work study pay is a very small portion of the jobs that we pay out or that we have at the university. Same thing is true with the salaries. For 2021, we were about 5.5 million. Now, one thing that does have a direct impact on us is minimum wage because of the increases that we've had over the past few years and the future minimum wage increase that will come out in January. That takes a direct impact on those budgets. And it's going to be interesting to see where we're at the end of this year, just with those minimum wage increases as well as post-COVID. Students weren't getting out there and getting jobs during COVID. Obviously, the campus was closed some of that time, but even when they came back, it was a slow process. Students were fearful of going out there and getting exposed or being in environments where they could be exposed. So I'm really excited to look at future data. Okay, so this is a report there, a chart that shows first generation data. And I think it's really interesting. When you look at the work study bar chart, first generation equates to about 55% of all work study students. So what we're seeing is work study, first generation is directly impacting that campus-based need. When you look at the budget jobs or jobs that were paid through departmental budgets, that's a much lower level. So I think that's interesting to see how that correlates. And I know that we know first generation, a lot of those will have high need, but that is directly impacted within student employment as well. So the student employment demographics for total jobs, as you can see, we have a lot of females that like to work. So we have about over 80% of our positions in work study are based off of the female gender. Overall, we're about 65%. So that's good information for us to have to know how to develop jobs for males. Are males wanting to work? Are there reasons why they aren't working? Things like that. So we look at things like that. The charts or the tables on the side just shows your ethnicity and your age ranges for the students that are working, which those are pretty much what you would expect for student employment. We do have a program. It is part of our work study program. It's called the Leaders in Community Service, and we are required to spend at least 7% of our work study funding in some type of community service initiative. So we developed a program many years ago. It's called Leaders in Community Service, and those students are work study students, but they're employed by us, and we pay their wages. However, they're working at nonprofit agencies within the Springfield community. This past year, we had 34 students that participated in that program. We had 40 contracted agencies. So there's a lot of agencies out there that would really like to participate in that program, but due to limited funding, we're not able to place a student at every agency. We have a match process with the agency and the student to determine the placement. But this past year, they worked 9,500 hours within the community. And that is great correlation to our public affairs mission, that they're using that time and getting out there. We paid $121,000 in wages for students that are participating in that program.
Cheryl, is that about your average budget for that program?
It kind of depends. So we can spend, we're required to do 6%. Typically, we run about 12 to 13%. We're wanting to grow the program this year, and we've actually received a little extra work study funding this year, which we're very excited about. That's something that we don't have much control over. So when we get that information from the federal government, we're always excited. So we're actually looking to expand that to about 40 students this year to utilize some of that extra funding. I will say that recruiting in the program this year has been a challenge. We have not received as many applicants for the program as what we'd like, and it's a continual marketing initiative. We are now going to be reaching out to some of the scholarship applicants that maybe didn't get some scholarships.
And our first gen students.
Yes, and I will get with you on that.
Just make sure you're repeating the question.
Oh, I'm sorry, for those that are listening. The question was, is that a typical budget that we run on that community service partnership every year of the 121,000? We are looking to expand that and to grow that, but we are looking to get those applicants in the program so we can grow that. So yes, Kelly, I will get with you and I will get some information from you, and we're going to reach out to some scholarship participants as well, because we do want to grow that. Right now, we're at about 30 students, so we'd like to add about 10 more going into the next academic year. So I talked about, we do post for off-campus employers. And there's a lot of reasons why we do that. It's called the Job Location and Development Program, and it is a facet of the work study program. So we can use a little bit of that funding to cover some administrative costs, so we can post for off-campus employers. Sometimes that's beneficial for a student because there might be a job in the community that would be very beneficial for their education goals. So that's something that we do promote. We do have a lot of employers in the area that post with us. Many of them are businesses. However, we also have students or people that, we have Greenwood parents that are hiring tutors for their children, or even within the Springfield area, we have personal assistants for people that are maybe needing some assistance in the home. So we have a lot of different opportunities outside of the normal business. Of course, we have a lot of business employers as well. So this past year, our community business postings and our partnerships, we had 532 different employers that were posting within that program. We had 364 students that were actually employed by those 532 postings, and that equated to an additional $3 million for students. As much as we'd like to say we have a job for everyone on campus, unfortunately, we don't. There are a lot of students that are wanting employment, and we do fill all those positions that we can, but this allows us to add additional employment opportunities for those students outside of campus. As far as our postings, so in our applicant portal, we had over 1,600 students that applied for jobs last year. We had 297 internal postings. So those would be postings from each of your departments on campus where you're saying you would like to hire someone. Of those, 35% of those were work study required postings, and 65% are work study optional postings. So there are some departments on campus that don't have an allocated budget to hire student employees. So those would be the ones that are saying work study required. The work study optional postings would be anybody, they obviously could hire a work study student, but they also have the means to pay for those students out of their operational budget. On average, we run about 19 applicants per posting. Obviously, some postings are more popular than others. So I know there are some postings that might get 50 or 60 applicants, and there might be others that get 2 or 3. But on average, we're looking at about 19 per posting. So in looking at the ethnicity components and the demographics for the postings, as you can see, the ethnicity, primarily our highest target are white or Caucasian students. And the tables on the side, explain gender and the citizenship. One that we watch very closely are the international students. So international students are required to work on campus. They cannot hold an off-campus position as part of the visa requirements. So when we see 22% of the students are applying and they're international, we're consistently looking to make sure that they have job opportunities. Sometimes that can be a challenge for them. And we do frequently see them coming in the office, looking for different positions because they're struggling after applying to jobs and not finding those. So we're always looking for new opportunities for them, and we try to monitor that statistic very closely. So, and one of the other things before I close, I did want to say, one of the areas that I think just in listening to the discussions today, we require GPA counseling for any student that falls below a 2.0 GPA while they're employed on campus. So they're required to come in our office and we speak with them. And we identify a lot of different trigger points or things that are creating that challenge. And that's not something that we've been keeping statistics on, but it's something we're going to be keeping in the future, because I can see by working with some of you here today, how that could be really helpful. We see a lot of mental illness. We see a lot of, I'm just not going to class, seeing not being engaged. So I would anticipate if you're one of those areas, I will probably be reaching out following this next semester to kind of develop some partnerships to see if we can work on some of those areas so you have some of that data. Thank you. First of all, any questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, financial aid, Rob and Cheryl, appreciate that. First of all, we have more coffee delivered, so if you tried to get coffee and it was out, there's more there. Secondly, what do you get when you cross an elephant and a rhinoceros? Elephino. Okay. Next is Career Center. So Kelly, if you can head this way. Kelly's going to cover this, but just a few things. As we've been working on a strategic enrollment management plan the last few years, and even conversations prior to that, there's been a lot of talk about the importance of outcomes for students, of finding a job. That's the main reason they're going here. And so the importance of the Career Center being involved in the whole enrollment management process is important. So I think it's good to hear from Kelly the data that they look at. Also, one of the funding measures for the state is collecting our outcomes and meeting requirements by the state. Those funding measures have not been used by the state since COVID, but they're still there and may be used at any point in the future. So that's another reason why data from the Career Center perspective is important. So again, Kelly will talk about that more, but just kind of wanted to get that lead. Thank you for those of you on Zoom. I've had a few messages from you in my email. Appreciate that. We will keep trying to remember to repeat the questions for you. Dr. Rapp.
Hello. I pretty much covered it, I think. Thanks, Rob. I'll sit down now. Just kidding. I have some slides with some data as promised, but Rob did give a good intro that I was going to touch on about how the Career Center is an important piece of the enrollment management puzzle. And I think by listening to the presenters already today, if you didn't already think so, you can see why maybe that's apparent. Getting students into college. Teresa's presentation was very enlightening. I liked the information on the Encura mindsets. Only the top 3 of the 6 were shown on the slide, but 2 of them mentioned careers. I bet the others did a little bit too. I did some of my own research. I did a master advisor forum with career advising in the fall and gathered some data on from RNL and others on how students are wanting return on investment. You know, the debates on, is college worth it? How can I know that I'm going to be prepared for the workforce? Parents also want to know that. There's data that kind of shows that it helps with retention. When the students come in, they get that career development, career preparation, the guidance early on. They're seeking it. When they get it, they last, they persist, they graduate, and they even become more satisfied alumni. So it is to everyone's interest in this retention, graduation, enrollment piece to kind of keep the career outcomes in mind. So thanks, everyone's kind of set it up nicely here. Also, Rob Moore, student debt. I mean, a lot of our students go into graduate school, but then they eventually get jobs. For those who go right after and get jobs, that's hopefully the idea, is that we help them for upward mobility and be able to pay back some of that debt that they've gotten. So enough background about that. This is the SEM data retreat. This is my first time presenting. It's only the second retreat anyway, but I'm going to just kind of give an overview, like Rob said, about the data that we collect. And like all the presenters have advertised, there is plenty more data available by request. I branched it out into 2 main areas. Career outcomes. Yes, a few years ago when the state was deciding that it was going to tie our funding to performance measures, there was a big push to have a cohesive, consistent, campus-wide effort to collect these data in a standardized way. The whole state decided they would do that by the first destination survey standards and protocols that's developed by our professional organization, NACE, National Association for Colleges and Employers. So the Career Center coordinates that outcomes effort and reports it back. We've been doing that for 5 years now. I'll have a little bit more about that on the next slides, but we do the outcomes. We want to have the data to show where are the students going. What can you do with your degrees here? And then, as many offices do, we also have internal data to look at our operations. So we can kind of see how are we doing in getting those students prepared and connected to the employers? What types of students are coming into our office? What services are they using? What employers are engaging with us? You know, are there gaps that we need to address? So kind of got two pieces here. And like Teresa was saying, trying to get everything in Slate. In 2019, we adopted Handshake. It's our career management platform, and we track everything in there: appointments, document uploads, job searches, employer engagement. So everything's in Handshake, and that is where we administer the graduate outcomes survey through. So just a little brief blurb, this commencement we just completed. We were trying to get the word out there about our graduate outcomes survey with the QR code. Take it, fill it out online. It's in Handshake. This is just a first little shot of it to show that it's kind of interactive. Students can do it on their phone, and once they click on a tab, it shows them the graphs of, you know, what other students have done. So try to kind of make it fun for them. Important to note, and maybe someday we'll get there, but right now it's just collecting the bachelor's degree earners, because when there was the state push, it was just going to measure bachelor's degree earners. So we're going with that. It is interesting to know where master's and doctorate students go, but we haven't put that into Handshake yet. So this is for the bachelor's degree earners. We send it out, but it's about the timeline. We send it out each semester, each term before commencement, send it out through Handshake, send it out through Handshake, send it out through Handshake, put it on social media, all of that. Prior to COVID, we used to be at commencement and we would hand them the paper forms. I liked that for the response rate. Our response rate isn't as great now, but we do follow up. We use the National Student Clearinghouse, the student tracker that Rob mentioned, and we find where students have gone to graduate school. So if the students don't respond to our survey, we track them down. We do reports like that. We find who has continued at MSU. That's a low-hanging fruit, Don Simpson used to say. But we also scour LinkedIn, and we find jobs and put those in. And then we also ask for faculty and staff input. I send lists in the fall to say, hey, do you know these people? Maybe you have a departmental survey that you've conducted, and you can just share that information along with us. So we put it all together, and it's a cycle, just keeps on going all the time. But for each reporting year, we finish by December 31st, and then we turn it into the state when they ask for it in mid-January. Then I compile it all together and send it out. So this is something that we've developed a few years ago. Actually, someone in institutional research had come up with this format, but we keep updating it every year. So this is our most recent data from the last year that we closed. I just would like to note the career outcomes rate, people who are working or going to graduate school or volunteering, this last year was pretty high, but I have an asterisk. The response rate has been lower, the knowledge rate as we call it. So the year of COVID and then this past year, our response rate has hovered around 66%. I'm not satisfied with that, so I want to keep trying. The average of the years before that was around 90 to 91% knowledge rate. So with that much information, you could be more certain. The good thing is, even with that high of a knowledge rate, our outcomes rate, the average was around 89% success rate. So 89 to 90% is our success rate. I want to get that knowledge rate back up, but we keep rolling averages over the last 3 years. That's what the state had wanted us to do. I spared you those charts and graphs, but I've got them on my notes if anyone wants to know. But besides that, I mentioned that I can report out data to the dean's department heads, the faculty who have helped us collect everything. This was the first year. This is just a sample one from the College of Agriculture. But this last March, we sent raw data to the departments, to the deans, and it's broken down by data. There's other tables on here, but it was interactive so that for colleges, you could see where your graduates have gone. That could be useful, you know, in a lot of different ways. I think that's data that people want. I don't know where I mentioned it here in my slides, but we do not have an interactive public facing dashboard as yet. It's always a work in progress. We've worked with Kristen a little bit trying to get that. I think she's waiting on me to clean up some data, but ideally, it would be nice that everybody could kind of get into this. Systems wise, it's just not there yet, but always data is available on request, and I'll try to keep proactively giving these kinds of data out each spring once we finalize. So I took the data from the last, all the years that we've been collecting that says 2017 to 2021. Also, by the way, for people on Zoom, I'm seeing this. I realize you can only see the top of my head because I'm short. I don't know. It's good enough, but I'll adjust it. Anyway, over the last years that we've been collecting data, these are our top employers. No surprise, Cox and Mercy. Those are neck and neck for employing our undergraduate students once they graduate. O'Reilly, you know, here in town. Interestingly, a lot of students are doing freelance or self-employed. That probably came up in the last couple of years for sure. MSU is a big employer of our graduates, and of course, Springfield Public Schools, Cerner, and BKD. Bass Pro Shop is tied with BKD. It also has 33. And then by industries, that kind of matches up. So by knowing the employers and the industries where our students go, and it can be broken down, you know, way more than this, but I've got some slides a little bit later when we look at our operations of which employers are coming to recruit on campus. We can kind of look and see if there's a matchup. Maybe there's some people that want to hire more students. You know, they want to come up on this list and they haven't been on campus. Then this is a way that we use data. That's the spirit of this retreat anyway. So we can use the data from the outcomes and our operations. So I also broke it down. We also have the data by ethnicity and other things. There's a lot of data we can see by the outcomes, but I thought this was an interesting kind of breakdown just to show relative proportions. And it's interesting, the not a US citizen, I combined some categories. So international students go to graduate school at a higher rate than some of the other students. And that's not entirely surprising. This is good to look at. So that's a little snapshot. I don't expect people to be able to read everything on this screenshot. I just put it here to show, again, throwing back to Handshake. I think most of you in this room have heard me or heard somebody talk about Handshake, but it is our career management platform where all students are loaded into Handshake by our friends in computer services that helped write programs. We put all students in there with their data. We collect data on ethnicity, and if they've reported, if they're first gen status, if they're an athlete, and then all the other information about their program of study. So all students have a Handshake account. They interact with the Career Center through Handshake. They sign up for appointments. They sign up for events. They interact with employers. They can talk to employers. They post their resume to Handshake. We review every single resume that gets posted to Handshake, and we give them feedback on it. So hopefully that's helpful to them to make it public, and they get contacted by employers. Employers reach out to them all the time. So students can sign up for employer events or on-campus events. They do job searches on Handshake. Anyway, it's full of data, and there's a dashboard in Handshake with all these little things. I like to get in and play with the data. Sometimes I don't know what the dashboard, they say you don't know what's under the hood. I don't know. So you can go to reports and you can create your own new report. Just, it's a little bit overwhelming, but the data is there. So that kind of covers that. So just a snippet of what we've been up to in the last year. In the last, I did it from June 1st. We had about 2,700 student appointments in the Career Center. About 2,617 resumes were uploaded. And like I said, they're reviewed. We have a team of student career ambassadors that we hire, and we train them to go over the resumes. They do it in person and on Zoom as well. So we give feedback. And then of all the students, not including alumni, but students who are currently enrolled who have been looped into Handshake, so that's all of our students, 44% of them are active in Handshake. that could mean different things. It could just mean they're logging in and looking at it. It could mean they're making appointments, talking to employers. I could delve down. But in comparison, our previous system, we had job tracks, if anyone's been around to remember that. We had about like 12 to 13% of students who used it. So Handshake has really helped us, you know, eventually we want all the students to at least get into Handshake. I'm glad, I mean, I want them all to come see us or engage with the Career Center, but if we had all 24,000, that would be a lot. So, you know, 2,700, that keeps us still pretty busy. I broke it down just to give a quick overview. The appointments that we did this last year, I thought it was interesting. We are offering in-person appointments again, but also still keeping the Zoom option. And in-person just kind of narrowly edged out 56% to 37% Zoom. So we do a mix. The most popular kind of appointment that we did was the resume review, cover letter review, and LinkedIn profile. That was 45% of our appointments. A lot of faculty use our services as a class assignment. They assign resume reviews. They also assign mock interviews. Our next biggest category of appointment was the mock interview, or just interview preparation in general. So students can come in and get prepared and get feedback so that they are, you know, ready. They got their resume, they got their cover letter. Almost tied with mock interviews though, at 16% of our appointments, was the career counseling. I do also like to mention that we help students, you know, along that whole way. They get in here, they need the help. Maybe they don't know what they're going to major in or how it's going to tie to their career. We do career assessments, and I do like to promote that and said it's never too early to come to the Career Center. And that's kind of like our third biggest category. So the rest go from there. I also broke it down by college here. I didn't put this chart up, but I also had it broken down by year in school. Not surprisingly, seniors give us the most business, but the second largest age group was sophomores, then followed by juniors, and then freshmen, and then graduate students. And then we had 79 alumni actually use us last year. Could be more, but so within college, this is just a summary of our percent of our appointments by college. And this is not really surprising in itself. College of Business is the largest college. It takes up most of our appointments. If you are in a college, you want to see data for your college, we could break this down, like Rob was saying with his stuff. We could break it down by anything. What I thought was interesting though, I did a quick little analysis. So for example, humanities and public affairs students made up 10% of our appointments last year. You know, I think, well, that's kind of a small college. But if I compare that to the number of students in their college, actually that was pretty comparable. It was about 10%. Oh, I guess what I was going to, sorry, College of Health and Human Services. They made up like 7% of our appointments, but only about 6% of their students came because they're such a large college. So proportionately, not as many of their students are coming. I'm not saying that as a bad way. They probably get a lot of good, you know, professional degrees and professional help within their college. They've got a, you know, a new advising center that deals with careers. So it's not a slight on any college. It's just useful. We can break it down and be like, well, what portion of this, you know, is it? College of Business, you know, they make up a lot of our appointments, but it's really still only 13% of their students that are coming. So we can have fun with that. I also broke it down by ethnicity just to see if it compared. So MSU student ethnicity, this is what Handshake told me of all the students that are in Handshake that have reported their ethnic backgrounds. So don't compare me to something on like the institutional research or the enrollment data. This is what came in. It's pretty close and accurate. But what's interesting is to see if it compares, like are our numbers reflecting what the university looks like, so we can know if we're missing out on any populations of students. And I mean, luckily this looks like we're not. The I mean, obviously, white Caucasian students are making up the bulk of our appointments, but other than unreported, the next biggest segment is the international students, and they make up our next biggest segment of usage. And then the next biggest segment was Black or African American, and they make up proportionately about our same proportions. So on the surface, it's okay there. There's always more work. We need it to be better. I'm not using this as, to justify anything. It's just data, interesting to tell us, are there gaps? Interestingly, for our career fairs that we have, I did the same kind of a breakdown, and it was still in the same kind of order, but international students attended our career fairs at a higher proportion than they are represented in our population. I have that they make up maybe in Handshake at least 6% or so of our population, but they made up 10% of our career fair attendees. And I can attest to that. We did see a lot of international students at our career fair. So I'm happy that we're getting some partnerships there. But this is just kind of example of the student engagement and what I can look at. I move on now to employer engagement. This is just a snapshot again of what we did in the last year. So if an employer wants to post jobs through Handshake, and we do post full-time jobs, we post internships. And then Cheryl and I and our offices talk a lot about sometimes the murky overlap between internships and off-campus part-time jobs. Sometimes it's doubly posted, trying to make sure students find the opportunities in multiple places. And we're working on the streamlining of that. But if an employer wants to post in Handshake, they create a Handshake account. Handshake, much like Slate, is the industry standard for career management platforms. So I think most companies, most big, like all big companies, have a Handshake account. Maybe they're not connected with MSU. They request to connect with us. Also, that's where we use the data, and our employer relations team kind of goes out and finds people to connect with if they're not with us. But in the last year, 3,227 employers newly connected with us. Since we got Handshake in 2019, about 9,646. And yes, we can break it down by region, by Missouri. A lot of employers are local, but the good thing about this platform is a lot of them, they're all over the country and the world. So Handshake's motto is democratizing access to opportunity. So it's all over the world. Students can find opportunities. So just in the last year, about 65,000 jobs were posted. Now, I mean, that's a little bit it's overwhelming. We're still trying to work on ways to get jobs to students that are the most relevant. Yes.
Quick question. Did you say that 65,000 is just this year or since 2019?
It's just this year. Oh, Teresa asked if 65,000 was the number of jobs just this year or all time, and it is just this year. It's about a 70-30 split. 70% of those are full-time jobs and 30% are internships, roughly. So Handshake has search filters. We try to work with students. It's always improving. They have some new features where we can tag like local employers or starred employers to help students narrow down. I mean, that's a lot of jobs, but on the one hand, yay, opportunity. So there's a lot of jobs out there for students. We also had a lot of employer engagement. We've gone back to in-person, but a hybrid of virtual. So we have employers that'll come to campus and do info sessions or interviews. We also have, through Handshake, some employers do virtual events like Amazon, not the one down the road in Republic, but like Amazon and Seattle had a virtual career fair info session. Other companies do virtual events on Handshake, but all of our students see that in their events feed that they can join into those. They can separate it by what's happening on campus that MSU invited, but also what's a virtual thing that you can join into as a student in Handshake. So there's a lot of different events, and put my notes here. Last year, 1,295 students attended events that we had with employers. That also counts those virtual employer sessions. So about 1,300 of our students were engaging with the employers through events. Not a large amount, but it gives us something to try to go from. And again, I could break that down. And then we have career fairs. We have our big one, the Career Expo and Education Career Fair in the spring. I know many of you have attended at the Springfield Expo Center, but different colleges have career fairs. I know there's the STEM Expo in the fall, and Hospitality Leadership has a couple of fairs, Agriculture Fair. College Business has a huge one in the fall. All of those fairs are run through Handshake so that we can track the information. And about 1,500 students attended career fairs throughout the year. So my last slide is just a little bit of showing, oh, I think it's funny. So I copied Rob's slide template because I'm like, those look good. I'm just going to copy them. So if Rob left his name, as he was joking in the slides, so did I. I was like, oh, I thought that's what we were supposed to do. So every single one of my slides has my name in case you were confused. So thanks, Rob. Anyway, these are employers, the job posting volume by industry. Healthcare jobs post the most. If you look back at my slide where our jobs, where our students go, kind of matches up, Cox and Mercy. This is healthcare all over the whole world, but there are just a lot of healthcare jobs out there in Handshake. So K-12, government, all of that. And then it also breaks down by event, but I just put the career fair attendance by industry. So it kind of shows like the top industries that are coming to our fairs and engaging. So this is where, again, we can kind of see and match up if there's a mismatch or some industry or employer, there's lists of employers too, that we want to reach out to more. So that's my last slide, but just using all this data together on the employer engagement, the student interaction with the employers and with our office for that career preparation, and then looking at the outcomes where they end up. There's a lot more. I'd love to do research on, were we helpful? How, was your degree related? We have some survey information, but data's fun and it takes a lot of time and we just aren't there yet. So thank you. Questions?
I do have a question.
Yes, Kristen. Kristen has a question.
So I was wondering, and you might have already mentioned this, I didn't see it right away in your data, but is the employers have make note of their version of modality, or whether it's hybrid or remote or full-time on-site?
Like the way that their jobs or the way that they recruit?
The way that their job is.
The way that their job is, yes.
For remote style jobs these days.
Yes.
I'm wondering if that's creating a difference.
Yeah, Kristen Arnett asked if employers get to indicate what type of job it is. Is it an in-person or remote or hybrid? And yes, they do. And yes, I had some data on that, but I didn't put it in because I didn't. But yeah, I mean, it's still the majority of jobs posted in here are still in person, but the chunk that were remote only and then more that were hybrid. So yeah, that is a trend we could look at. I haven't yet, but yeah, there's all sorts of data. More questions? If anyone wants any delved in data, unfortunately I can't put you to an Argos report, but you just email me and I'll find it for you. So.
Are we good for one more section and then a break? All right, seeing no big opposition to that, we'll do one more section. And how do you identify a nosy pepper? It gets jalapeno business. More laughter, please. Okay. Dr. Michelle Olson is our Director of Institutional Research and here to talk about institutional research's perspective on data. And Michelle has created over this, since the last SEM data retreat has created a lot of new dashboards using Power BI that I mentioned earlier. So I think she'll mention that and some other things. So come on down, Michelle. And we will have institutional research and then take another break. All yours. Thank you.
Well, this is interesting. It's been really fun listening to everybody and their experiences with data and their willingness to share. And it's just very interesting. It kind of ties in a lot to what I was going to talk about. So I just want to start with this because of the workforce that we just talked about. When I worked in North Dakota, I was a director of an organization that was called Find It, Follow-up Information on North Dakota Education and Training. During my time there, we collected data from the State Job Service, 7 state agencies, and 11 higher ed institutions. And the reason that we did that is because North Dakota at that time was right on the verge of a oil boom. They knew it was coming, and they knew that they didn't have enough folks to cover the jobs in North Dakota. And so they were actively recruiting folks to train and prepare for that. And they were so desperate, and this is really true, they took folks from the prison and put them out in the workforce with guards. Anyway, during my time there, you can imagine how difficult it must have been to manage that data simply because it came from everywhere. So there was creative ways that organizations used to enter data into their system. It came out of their system and had to be processed to go into my system. But the reason I bring this up is it took me about 5 years to get that straightened out. But the benefit of it was, and I don't know that people here know this, but for my dissertation, I modeled an information system. And so I learned how to manage huge amounts of data. I'm going to talk millions and millions of records. So anyway, I just have to brag a little bit because that was at the time state of the art. I did my own programming and got it to work. The data would come into my system would process it. If there were errors, it would kick it back to the agency that owned the data. If it was fine, then it would go into the database all automatically, when prior to that, we had to do it by hand. So that was, it was a big deal for me and a big deal to be able to use it to earn my doctorate degree. So and I have to tell you, when I did my defense, the folks that were around the table, they had no clue what I was even talking about. So folks in my cohort gave me a bad time about it was too easy for me to earn my doctorate because nobody knew what I was talking about anyway. Okay. So what I'm going to talk about today mostly is demonstrating for you some of the dashboards that we have built. We've been working with lots of data over the last couple of years and screening it and cleaning it up like I did when I was in North Dakota, and then building dashboards that are interactive and have the capability to provide information in real time to the folks that are actually using the database. So the dashboards, or we call them the Provost dashboards, and they are all online. Most of them are public. In other words, that means that anybody in this room could access that information. There are a few that are password protected, and that would be for the reason of information that's contained in them that's not private, that is private, or a situation like with dual credit, that dashboard is not open to the public because Joy Norris feels like it would give our competition a way to compete better with us. So it's so for the most part, the provost has decided to become more transparent, and that's why these databases were open to the public now. So the databases that I'm going to cover today, the one Enrollment Plus Awards, that database was built, or that dashboard was built to accommodate a long-range plan. So it's designed as a quick lookup when you need information to answer questions regarding the long-range plan. But there's also other uses for it. But retention, and I'll show you these here in a second, the college and department resources, which is our newest one that we've built for the deans and the department heads so that they can do their annual reports, or I'm sure they have other ways to use it as well. Faculty and staff, general education profile, which is done for Dr. Smith as a research tool. Actually, it's one of my favorite dashboards, but it only covers the general education. And then we have historicals, student credit hour, and that is a dashboard, again, one of our first ones that we did. And so when we cycle back through this next year, what we'll do is renovate that, so to speak, so it's a little better. You can tell it's one of our first ones because it's kind of archaic looking, but so I always like to cover a little bit of information because I'm a why person. So historical information is important to me. And there's a reason that we are actually reporting what we're reporting. And it dates back to the 1840s, 1830s. So, well, this went ahead, didn't it? But then you follow it further back. It goes back to the 1600s. So the Puritans, when they came here, education was really important to them, and they were considered highly educated simply because they could read and write. So when they arrived in the United States, they arrived with boatloads of books and people, and they built their first school in Boston, which is called the Latin School. And that little school still stands. I don't know why this is going. There's a little picture of it. I have to hurry. Right there, that little school. You can actually go and stand in front of it. And the building that's there, right there, I believe that's the building that holds the printing press. And it's still there and looks just like that. It just has a lot of buildings, modern buildings around it. So 3 people, Bernard and Horace Mann and this other Harris person, they're considered the pillars of education. And those are the folks that started all this research stuff. So for instance, Horace Mann was instrumental in doing surveys. And one of the first surveys that he did was about occupations, interestingly. And that's where the survey stuff started. And they used that information then to leverage for the schools to determine what to teach, how to teach, whatever. But anyway, those folks were caught up in a situation where we had 200 years of the Puritans owning education. And then the communities, when they started showing more interest in their school, so they got involved. And when they got involved, that started school boards, and then that started a few politics at the state level where they changed the school schedule from 9 months to 6 months. And that started the downward spiral in education. And it took 50 years to recover from that. And during that time, what happened was the folks that had money were able to finance their schools. But the folks that didn't have money, they managed to send their kids to schools, but the schools were in very bad shape. They weren't good enough for occupancy. And so that kind of is what started all of the research, because Mann and Harris determined that because there was no accountability, the schools did what they wanted to do. And that resulted in the wealthy being educated, where the folks that are in poverty weren't as well educated. So anyway, so now this information, why do we report what we report? So it trickles down really from the federal government. The federal government makes a decision about what's important. They hand it to the state government. The state government has an education committee. They write the protocols. They write everything. I mean, I get questions a lot about why are you counting numbers the way that you're counting numbers? And why do these numbers not reconcile? Well, it's because we're mandated to handle the records in a certain way. So then from the state, it goes to Cliff. And then from Cliff, it goes to Frank. And Frank is very organized and he's always way ahead of the game. And he has little assignments. He gives us a little, it's the action plan, gives us assignment is highlighted. And it names the folks that are responsible for certain areas. So it doesn't name IR, but I can tell you anything that has Frank's name on comes to IR. But because he's so organized and we can predict now what he's doing from year to year because it's cyclical. So now we're getting a new provost, so we'll see how that goes. But anyway, so we're heavily tied to the vision, the mission, the long range plan, all of that, even though we're kind of in the background, the numbers are generally coming from IR with the help of a lot of folks on campus. So here's the accountability. Our job is to attract, retain, and graduate good students. What we report to is, we call it iPads, but iPads is really a database that holds the data that we send to the feds to be put into the database. And it consists of multiple surveys with lots of data that we have to collect. It's very time consuming. And this is something that we actually automated this last year, our processes. So rather than it taking several weeks to complete these reports, we can get them done now within a couple hours, each of them, which is huge for us because that frees us up to be able to do other things. But the list over here with the NCES, right here, here's an example of when some kind of comparisons with big data. And we're just starting to work on this. So, and it's admissions at this point in time because admissions is top, I mean, A in the alphabet. So I'm going to demonstrate this to you. You won't have access to this until we've added a couple more modules. But so Rob, I'm going to try to go from here to the web.
Okay.
Let's see if it works. There it is. Yes. So this is Power BI. It's our most recent example of dashboard. It comes up here. So this has, for admissions, every single campus in the United States. So whoever uses this dashboard can do some comparisons. And that's the beauty of iPads and the federal reporting is everybody has to submit data in this using the same protocols, which makes the data comparable. However, it wouldn't be wise to compare ourselves with campuses like Harvard or Oxford or some of those other campuses, and that's kind of common sense. But administration really likes to look at this stuff and see where they're at. And so this is an example. Right now, so you can see what's selected over here, admissions, applications, enrolled total. Well, that's what this matrix is over here. So whatever you choose and in whatever order you choose, it will build you a matrix over there. And you can see all of the information that you can, that we submit to the iPads database. It's all there as regards to admissions. This is where we get the information where I think it's applied, enrolled, and those numbers come from this survey. So we kind of do this in the background, and I'm not sure that a lot of people know that we do this, but that's our responsibility to take care of. So here's just another example of what you can do. Here we have, now that's changed, and I set that so it would change automatically because I didn't want to fumble around with a computer, but you would have to do the selections that you want there. But now you've got admission total, application total, enrolled total. So these numbers would differ somewhat from the numbers that Rob would crunch for enrollment and maybe admissions, because there are folks that are counted in what we call the big number or Rob's number. We're actually thinking about defining that would be less students who are ELI, who are independent and auditing classes. So and that's a population between 500 and 700. So I brought with me copies of our bear stats so everybody could see those. Under the first cover, there's a little explanation where we explain what the big number is versus a small number. And then the rest of the data in the bear stats is IPEDS data. So you'll see some discrepancies. That little booklet is something that we built for whoever's going to some kind of meeting, maybe it's at the legislature, maybe it's someplace else, but it's designed to put in your suit coat pocket so that you can pull it out when you need it. But we have found, especially now that we're building the dashboards, people want to make sure they have the correct numbers. And so the bear stats can be used as a resource to match with, to see if your totals match. And if the totals don't match, you need to go back and try your filters again. And generally what happens is people forget to unselect the filter, and then it causes only a few records or too many records or something like that. So this dashboard, the reason I wanted to show it to you is because of sheer number of records, and it's really big data. And there's lots of tricks to getting it to function the way that it does. So the foundation is Power BI, but there are some coding, there's some programming language that goes along with it to make it function seamlessly. So, okay, so I wanted to start at the home page so that everybody knew the path. There's actually separate paths that you can follow to get to the Provost dashboards. So on the search, you either can type in Provost dashboards and go directly to it, or you can type in institutional research. I'm going to use institutional research because there's a couple things I want to show you on the page where the link is. So I'm just going to type in institutional research. So on our page, right underneath the graphic that's at the top where it says Office of Institutional Research, there's a button that's right in the center that says Provost Dashboards. And then there's another link that is right there that you can use. So you have several ways that you can get there. I want to pause a moment on IR's webpage and talk about the resources that are here. You have a copy now of Bear Stats. We do that every fall. We do have electronic versions as well as paper versions. And so if you wanted extra copies, we have extra copies, and you can come to IR and get them, or we can send them to you through MSU mail. Just below that is fact book. We have discontinued the fact book because it is labor intense. It's overwhelming, even I think to the folks who try to use it, because it's like a couple hundred pages. And we feel like we've accommodated the data in the dashboards that we've built. So we have left them there for archiving purposes. What we have, if there are some copies that date back maybe late 70s, early 80s that are available in the library. So we didn't discard them. We just moved them around. There's a link to Argos reports. And then scroll down. The key performance indicators right there. And then there's all these state, regional, federal compliance, ratings and rankings, the Delaware productivity report, diversity report, publications. So there's all kinds of things that we handle behind the scenes. I think a lot of folks think we just do state and federal reporting, but we do way more than that. So that information is there as well. But I'm going to go to the key performance indicators. They're very different than they were in the past, in that we have condensed them right down to Frank's presentation for the board. And this can be used as a quick lookup. We have folks that call with questions. Many times we can go right to Frank's, what I call slider, but it's really his presentation that he uses for the board. We maintain it for him. And again, he's very organized, so he knows weeks ahead of time that he wants to tweak something and we get it done for him. Also, Rob had asked us when we were building these last fall if we would include the SEM goals. And so you'll see the SEM goals right there on the page. So there's several of them with the goals, and these are tied to our action plan, long-range plan and action plan. So it's a good resource. The numbers will match with anything that you have, like the FAIR stats, any other document that we have. I might also state that we've talked about differences between IR and Rob's numbers. When we built our dashboards, we very carefully used or leveraged the same protocols, the same logic that was used by Rob and other folks. So if something doesn't reconcile, there's an error somewhere, and we appreciate if people bring that to our attention. Anyway, so that's there. So now I'm going to go to the dashboards. So if you get to the Provost page, you won't find the dashboard. The Provost dashboards are in a separate area. So the first one that we did was retention dashboard. And we're cycling around now, and we will be making some updates to that report. One of the things that was talked about, I believe it was Jamie that talked about data sources, and she was talking about data for parents, that parents are entering. I just learned last weekend when I was doing some research that parent information has a heavy influence on whether a student will be retained or persist. And so those are the types of things that we will add to the retention dashboard. And we have more than one way now to get to the retention. And I'll show you that in a minute. It's just taking a long time to load. There's a lot of data that's behind this, so it takes a while. Not generally this much time. But anyway, so this was our first brush with building a dashboard. And it doesn't quite have everything that people want. It gives you the overall retention rate from year to year by campus, the whole campus, and then also by college and department. So the buttons on the top, the cohort would be the IPEDS cohort. It's usually about 2,500 to 3,000 students. Those are the FitNICs. College department, race, Pell, first gen, and the QB is just another format that you can look at. So you can click on any of those buttons and you can take a look by college what retention rate is. And what you see is the tall bar is the cohort. In other words, that's how many they started with. The green bar is where they were 1 year later. And the gray bar is how many students we lost. And the red bar represents how many more students we had to maintain to get that retention rate to 80%. We tried really hard to help you folks with that. That seems to be important. But also kind of hidden in different places. And we did it on purpose because initially we didn't know how the data were going to be used. We didn't know if it was going to be private or open to the public. And so when you are using this dashboard and you're having trouble finding something, just keep in mind that we hit it on purpose. So you can choose you can choose what term, what fall term to 1 year to the next. You can choose male, female. You have the option of race, ethnicity, And you have the option of age groups. So when you were talking, somebody was talking about non-traditional students. If the definition of your non-traditional students is driven by age, this is a place where you can identify those folks, perhaps. Then we started experimenting with the maps because we thought it was important that we could see where the students were coming from that were retaining by the United States as well as county. Interestingly, that one little county that's up there in the very top that's white, right there, we've never had a student from that county. I think it's because it's the Amish population and students that wouldn't probably come to MSU. Anyway, you just have to get in here and click around. And then notice that at the bottom of these dashboards, there's tabs. So right now we're on the first tab. The second tab is high school GPA compared to first term GPA at MSU. And we put this one here because when we were messing with the data, we took note of, I mean, everything just happened at once. Everything got come into alignment and we could see the decline. I don't want to say decline, where the student, the GPA, the first term GPA and the high school GPA gives you a clue about where the students are going to stop persisting at MSU. So anyway, I think that helped Kelly a little bit, but I'm not sure. I'm sorry, I'm not a PC user, so this is hard. So I'm going to go back. I'm just going to go through these fairly quickly, but I think the one I want to show you most is our most recent one. It has just about everything on it. The college department and review resources. This one I feel like now is the most comprehensive, and I feel like you can go to this dashboard and get just about anything that you're looking for now, and it's in one place. I mean, it has retention multiple different ways: first year to second year, first year to third year, first year to fourth year, second to third, third to fourth. You have the ability to select. Also, if you're looking again to identify those students who are non-traditional, you have the ability to select the age group. So you have all of these filters, and it defaults to College of Natural and Applied Sciences, because Tammy was instrumental in encouraging us to do things that we didn't think we could do. So that's why. All of the little tabs that are over here are different pages in this, but I want to call your attention down here. You can't really see it very well. We put a help button, and that help button now provides definitions for folks that are using the dashboard that will help them better understand how those numbers were arrived at, what the protocols were for those. But you can, there's awards, enrollment awards, student credit hour 2, and then our graduate rates, 6-year, 4-year, 6-year, and 8-year grad rates, all commonly asked for. And then whatever you've chosen over here will be represented over here. One of the things that we added was the unduplicated count and the duplicated count. So when you do use the dashboard, you have to be careful about your filters again. I recommend that you refresh often. It'll help you navigate and quicker, and you can be assured that you'll get the right numbers. So in this particular case where it says right here where it says college and department, You can choose any of the colleges, you can choose all of them if you want numbers for the whole campus. The departments under natural and applied sciences are all represented here. The geo origin, race ethnicity, first gen, freshman, sophomore, I'm only reading to you because I don't think you could see them. And then up above, you have gender, age, level, meaning freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. I can't even read them all. Pell, non-Pell, so on and so on and so on. So again, these dashboards are interactive. You can click on just about anything on the page and it will take you somewhere else. And you just, I would just recommend to get in there and play around. If you have questions or need help, we're happy to provide you with whatever you need. We get a lot of phone calls, which we like. So we try to answer whatever it is that you're needing. So let me go back here. So this is the menu of the dashboards. And again, you just need to get in and poke around. But right here where it says dual credit dashboard, there it says permissions required. Those are the ones that you won't be able to access. And one of the other ones that we have been working on, we've worked with some of the enrollment folks that Frank wanted us to build was, and this one requires permissions. The program enrollment trend, it's live data that you can go to and what Frank can go to, and he can monitor registrations in real time. How many courses are being filled, how many courses are not being filled, sections, how many sections there are, how many sections you might need. So he has reasons other than what the registrar would use the information for. It's just his way of double checking. It was fairly complex and fairly hard to do, but it works. So we're happy to demo that if anybody wants a demo of that. So we have 2 student credit hours. The one that's permissions required only is one that we're revamping for this next year. And so as soon as we're done with that, that will become public and we will archive the old one. So that's where we're at. Anybody have questions?
Just one, Michelle. I haven't figured out how to download into Excel any of the Provost dashboards.
Okay, that is something right now we're building paginated reports for, because if we do the export, it will export everything. And the only way we can control that is through the paginated reports. We are building them for the enrollment awards dashboard. And we are going to transition over to the deans and faculty so that you have that capability. And that, what happens with that is you have all the filters, the little squares that you can click. You choose what you want on your report, and it will build it for you.
Right. Okay. So that's coming soon.
It is coming soon. Okay. It's taken us a while because it's only a few of us, and we have to learn. There's a learning curve to all of this. So. Any other questions? Sorry, there's so much to cover, and it's kind of frustrating not to be able to cover everything, but again, you can contact IR and we'll help you any way that we can.
Thank you much. For those on Zoom, Jake asked about getting exported data from the dashboards, and Michelle said they're working on paginated reports to be able to do that, because exporting directly out of the dashboard would pull out too much data. So that was that question. I owe everybody a quick break. We are running a little behind on time, so let's just do another 5-minute break. I've got 11:35, so 11:40. And then I would ask those presenters to just do your best to be as efficient as possible. But I think it's all good information to share as well. So let's go ahead and take a quick 5-minute break. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving, so get us started. So next up is our registrar's office. We have both Angela Young, our registrar, and Shannon Holt, our associate registrar for records and registration. So all yours. Oh, I do. Okay. Yeah, I was just going to cover this slide real quick before our registrar people. We developed this slide or this website years ago. So the link on the bottom can be, if you go to the enrollment management website, you can get to that. It has reports for academic departments primarily. So this is a list of the different reports that are available, but for instance, reports on course demand, headcount comparison, and enrollment by course, and different tools like that. These are all standard reports that you can get in Bear Intelligence. Click on it, pick the semester and run it. And if you need any help, of course, you can contact either us or that QDoug email link, and somebody can help you in running those. But these are some of the reports that we've had around for a long time for academic departments to use. Angela and Shannon are going to talk about some additional resources and enhancements to some of these, and thought it was a good bridge from the institutional research presentation to talk about some additional tools, especially for academic departments from the Office of the Registrar perspective. So now I'll hand it over.
Thank you, Rob. We took a little bit of a different approach today from what has been done up until this point. So I did not bring a lot of charts and numbers to share with you today of what we're doing. I will share with you that earlier this week we did award nearly 3,000 degrees and certificates. So that was exciting. It has been a busy week in the Office of the Registrar with all of our end of term processing going on. So what we've decided to do with our time today is to kind of give you the tools to go out and get some of the information specific to you that you would like to have. And what we wanted to do, the approach that we wanted to take, was to show you the pathway of how to get into Argos, pull out that information that you really want. I'm calling it on-demand information. So you could go out anytime, grab this information that is specific to you and to your area. A few pieces that we were thinking about as we walked into this today was thinking about where we are right now. So what we're actually going to show you, what Shannon is here to walk you through and kind of provide some of the detailed information on. I know a lot of folks are looking at the schedules right now, moving into summer and fall, looking at what our enrollment is, how many seats we have left, what modalities we're using, things of that nature. So we picked a couple of reports, and I have them listed here. Our class schedule search view and our course master data with banded reports. So that's what we want to do today, is kind of just show you how to get to this information, how to pull it up, what it means, how it can be useful to you. There's a lot of other pieces like this that we would be happy to show you how to get to, so that you have it at your fingertips at any time. If you have any questions as we're going through this today, we encourage you to just speak up and ask them. We'd really like for this to be as interactive as you would want it to be. All right, Shannon.
Hi, everyone. I think I know most of you, but in case any of you don't know me, I'm Shannon Holt. I work in the Office of the Registrar, and my main areas are records and registration, but in my free time, I do like to dabble in data and report writing. So some of you may be aware, hopefully all of you are aware, that we recently went live with the new registration system. Overall, it's been a big success, but when we were sort of designing and customizing that system, not designing, customizing really that system, we really kept our students in mind. And what we realized after we went live and put that system out for everyone is that many of our academic departments were actually using the class schedule search and things like that for things that we were not aware of. So this first report that we're going to highlight here is actually in response to the registration system and some needs that departments had that they lost as we moved to that new system. So one of the big things that changed is that departments no longer had access to all of the enrollment data for a class on the class schedule search. They had to kind of dig in a little bit more. And so we always want to encourage departments to go out to Argos and use Argos reports for the most accurate, up-to-date data about classes, about anything, really. It's all out there in Argos. So we created a new report, and it is this class schedule search view report. And what we did was gather all of the data that was on the class schedule search results in the old system and just create an Argos report for that. So it's going to give you all of your enrollment data for your courses. So that means the actual number of students enrolled, the maximum amount of seats in that course, the amount of available seats, the maximum amount of waitlisted seats in your course, how many students are actually on the wait list, and how many waitlisted seats are available, and then cross-listed course information as well. So the max amount of seats in your cross list, so between 2 courses or 3 courses that are taught together, the actual amount of students enrolled, and then the amount of available seats, all of which is really helpful information for departments as they're deciding whether they need to add new courses, what the demand is for certain courses in their department. So we definitely wanted to make sure that that information was available at your fingertips. It also includes campus code, credit hours, instructor, part of term, meeting days and times, and then any attributes that are associated with your classes. So we kind of pushed all that together into one report. It is, as Rob talked about earlier, an ODS prod report, which means that the data updates overnight and it will be accurate. It will be accurate data reflecting the previous day. The path to this report and to get into Argos at all, you can go into your My Missouri State, click on your Work Resources tab, and then there's going to be a channel called Admin Banner Information Access. There's actually a couple different places you can access it, so either one of those. And you're going to click on the Argos Web Viewer link. You do need to make sure that you are either connected to a campus network or signed into a VPN if you're off campus. To make sure that you can access that. Otherwise, you'll get some weird errors as you try to open those links. Within Argos, you will have multiple folders depending on your role at the university. You may have a ton, you may have only a few, but student is the folder that our office deals with most often. And within that, there are some campus-wide folders, which are reports that are widely available to most people who have Argos access around campus. The 2 that I would recommend looking in and utilizing most for student and data that is covered by the Office of the Registrar would be the campus-wide course folder and the campus-wide student folder. You may also see a campus-wide enrollment and a campus-wide graduation folder and grading. All of those have kind of other pockets of data in them. So please go out and just look through there. If you're ever thinking, man, I would really like to know something about this specific set of students, there's a good chance there's already a report out there with that data. There's a ton of reports that are already existing. It's a matter of just kind of searching to see if you can find what you're looking for. This particular report is in the campus-wide course folder, and it's called Class Schedule Search View, as I said. This is a preview of what the parameters in this report look like. So you can choose your term, your college, you can choose all colleges. You can choose a department if you want to see just one department, or it'll automatically just select all departments within whatever college you've chosen. If you choose all colleges, you can also choose all departments. So it gives you a little bit of ability to see exactly what you're wanting to look at. Try to open this link here and show you this report. So I've just got into Argos Web Viewer here. You can see the student folder is here. search. Campus-wide course. Those are alphabetical, so I happen to have quite a few folders that I have access to, but and it is toward the top here, so it's this class schedule search view. I'm just going to click on that. Summer 2022. And I'm just going to do all departments and click run query. We built it to where you can just look quickly within this window here, or you can also download a report if you want to have an Excel file to work with. We try to put all of the fields in the same order that you're used to seeing them in, so that if you used to use the class schedule search, you could just pull this up and it would all look familiar. You'll see it loaded pretty quickly. It puts the courses in order by subject and course number. And then it has all of the information here with the meeting days, meeting times, buildings, rooms, all of that information and the attributes. If a course happens to have multiple attributes, they will all be listed in this field. So just like previously, you can see that. Does anybody have any questions about this report at all? I think most of you were probably made aware of it after we heard about that need and sent it out to everyone. We also, in our office, many of you probably work with Katrina Chavez if you're in an academic department. She oversees our class schedule, kind of helping departments make sure that all the classes are built correctly so that students will get charged correctly, helping them with any questions that come up as they're offering new courses, trying to figure out different ways to offer courses, things like that. So we're always here to support you with that. And this next report is one that is used heavily and we would recommend using as far as getting data about the courses that you offer. So the last report kind of had a brief synopsis of data about your classes that you're offering in a semester. This one is going to have a lot more data. So just a wide, huge variety of information. And any of you who have ever worked with building classes know that there's a ton of information that goes into adding a class to the class schedule. You know, modalities, course comments, linking, co-requisites, prerequisites. There's so much information that's out there. So this report has a lot of that information. It does take a little bit longer to run, so I just want to warn anybody who does go out to try to run this report that if it takes a few minutes, don't be concerned. It's just a lot of data that this report is trying to pull for you. It features, you can also use this report to really narrow down your results more. So there's a lot more parameters to choose from. You can choose a specific location for classes, building, meeting days, instructor. There's a variety of actual reports that you can download from this data block. So you can get an Excel file, you can get some pretty PDF files if that's what you're needing. You can see course comments for your classes, and you can view a lot more schedule details than what you might have seen in the previous report. The path to this report is very similar. It's also in the campus-wide course folder, and it's just called Course Master Data with Banded Reports. Again, these are the parameters that we were seeing, that I was mentioning earlier. So you can choose academic period, you can choose college, department, status, so whether it's active, held, both, if you don't care. Whether you want to include tracking courses, so if you happen to be a department that is part of a cooperative agreement with another university, do you want to see students who are actually not really your students, but they are taking one of our classes? You can toggle that back and forth. You can choose parts of term, whether you want to see just first block or just second block or everything. And then there are some specific parameters for outreach. So whether you would like to look at only what were formerly called ITV courses, certain campuses, and then instructional methods as well. here's a preview of what that, all those parameters look like. So not all of them are required. A lot of them are optional, and a lot of them give you the option to choose to view everything. That's how most of our reports are set up. So you have certain parameters that you're forced to choose, others where you can either choose multiple things, only one thing, or choose everything. I'm not going to run this one only because it does take a while and I don't want to take up time doing that. But once you do make your parameter selections, you'll click up at the top of your page where it says reports, and that's where you can choose how you want to view the results. Do you want an Excel file so that you can manipulate the data and sort it and do all that sort of fun thing? Or do you just want a abbreviated PDF with just a few things on it? Do you just want location data? There's a variety of options here. That you can choose from. So go out there and explore and see, what's out there that fits your needs for the information that you're needing. These reports, as Angela said, are on demand. So you can access them anytime, any day. It doesn't have to be between 8 and 5. It can be anytime, anywhere, really, as long as you have a VPN on your computer. You can access them from home if you're, after hours and you're working from home doing a little bit of late night research, you can still access these reports. So, and there are, like I said, really tons of reports out there. I would say hundreds of reports out there that have already been written, some of which are very specific, some of which are very broad and allow you to really choose what information you want to gather that's useful for you. So whether that's course information, getting enrollment information to make decisions about what classes to offer now or in the future, or whether that's information about students in your department. In that campus-wide student folder, there's a lot of reports, some of which are related to student majors, student programs. There's just almost an endless amount of data available at your fingertips that you may not even realize. So anytime you have a question that you are wondering and you think, man, if I just had the data on this, I could answer that, go out and look. Just
Just a question.
Yeah.
on that. I'm relatively new.
Yeah.
and Sometimes I'll look at someone else's and they have a lot more reports there. So how do we get access to those? Because it seems like sometimes they don't know who to reach out to get that, or it will be like in a testing folder. or
Yeah.
some weird thing. So
Yeah, that's a good question. And I may, I'll answer what I know and I may ask Teresa to fill in the gaps. But I think typically if you get Argos access, you will have access to the campus-wide folders that pertain to you. So anything that's in those folders, you should have access to. Now, a lot of times departments will have specific folders, and then users who create reports can also have a folder that is not publicly available. And so we really encourage anyone who's writing reports to move them to a public place so that anyone can access them, because if it's just living in your folder, it's not doing anyone a lot of good. Now, as far as like individual department folders, I believe you have to work with QDOG to get access to that. Okay, Teresa's nodding her head. So the question was, sorry, I forgot to repeat that, but for new employees or employees who are not using Argos right now, how do they get access to folders? So that would be my recommendation. If you see someone using a report that's in what appears to be not a public folder.
I think that's the hardest thing. to know
Yeah.
that it's out there, then ask for access. 'Cause
Yeah.
Sometimes we'll get reports emailed to us from different people, and like you said, that real time on demand
Yeah.
option is very powerful to go and say, if say the person's waiting on it or relying on someone else to run it for you.
Yeah, I would definitely.
Shannon, can you just summarize the question?
Yes, yeah, so the original question was about how do you get access to different folders in Argos? And then the follow-up was sometimes we get reports sent to us and we would really like the ability to run those repeatedly when we need the data. So I would say if you are getting a report from someone and you're not sure how to access it, or it appears that maybe you don't have access to it, ask them to please work with QDOG to get it moved to a public place so that you can run it on demand whenever you need to.
super specific question, maybe someone will know the answer. Is there a report for student credit hours generated through credit for prior learning or credit by assessment?
That is a good question. So the question was, is there a report for student credit hours generated through prior learning assessment? I don't know off the top of my head, but I can look. And I would imagine that it would be in the campus-wide student folder. That's where I would look, since it's student-related data. So I will try to remember to look that up and send that to you, but if I forget, please send me an email and I can help you search for that. Questions? I think that's the end of our slides.
Thank you very much, Angela and Shannon. Okay, as Rhonda heads down, you know, a big topic that's on campus, and even before the pandemic, but certainly even exacerbated now, is student mental health. So this could be a whole retreat to talk about student mental health. Remember, we're not here talking about a lot of the issues that are non-data related. Rhonda's primarily talking about the from a data perspective. But we appreciate you being here and to talk to us about kind of issues about student mental health from a data lens. And real quickly, what do you call a parade of rabbits hopping backwards? A receding hairline.
That's great. You know, I love jokes too. And so I'm going to give a third grader joke if I can in this same spirit. And I'm an equine enthusiast as well. So those of you who know that about me will understand. Why did the pony struggle to speak? It was a little hoarse. Okay. Well, I think I can modify and make this work. I could probably take up the entire amount of time and then some, but I'm going to jump around. So thank you for bearing with me. Will I be able to pull up our website at some point, the Counseling Center website? Okay. I'm technologically challenged sometimes. So. Okay. Just really quickly, we talked about COVID. No surprises here. 1 in 5 college students say their mental health significantly worsened, and 80% of the students reported that COVID-19 negatively impacted their mental health. We all see that. We know this, but it's helpful to see it in the data. I'm just going to skip a couple of these. The HMS data, Healthy Minds study, looking specifically at Missouri State. We gave this to our students a couple of years ago. And this is kind of what it looks like. Depression and anxiety, 39%, 36%, probably not a surprise. And lifetime diagnosis of mental health disorder would be 41%. We had about 1,100 students take that, sent it out to about 4,000 students. And then when you look at the Counseling Center annual data, which is on our website, if I don't get to pull it up, you can find our annual reports over the last 5 years. They're pretty easy to read and lots of good information there, but 76% of the students that come in report anxiety. Our top 3 are depression, anxiety, depression, and relationships. Depression and relationships flip-flop back and forth each year. So. And some people are surprised that about 1/3 of the students, sometimes it's 1/4 of the students, depending upon the year, report that they have suicidal ideation on some level. Many of them, it's just wishing they were no longer here or wanting life to stop, not necessarily making a plan to end their life, but still it's serious. And then just a whole host of other common issues that students bring. We this year will serve about just under 1,500 students, I think is our projected amount, over 5,000 student visits. And then let's see, and this is the trend over the last decade or so, actually. And if you look at that, I got here right before, in between the 753 and the 1120. So that fall, it really jumped the student demand. And that's been the trend ever since, except for 2021 with COVID. But nationally, we saw the numbers of students reaching out for mental health concerns drop. This year, the last column there is a projection. Again, that's what we project our stats will end up at. So we're back in that same trend. And I expect we'll be busier than we've ever been in the fall. We just completed our busiest spring ever on record. So I think, yes.
What's the breakdown of undergrad versus grad student usage?
You know, that is in our annual data. You want to help me do that?
Well, I'm sorry, I don't want to.
Okay, okay. Yeah. I wish I could remember off the top of my head. Actually, you know, if I could probably just tell you, because I have my annual report right here. So let me just tell you real quick. Okay. That would be this page. Okay, so 12% of our students visiting the counseling center are graduate students. So that would leave everybody else, about 78% undergrad. Is that good? Okay. And, you know, probably no surprise if you look back, you know, 2014 and 15 and beyond, it felt very manageable. We had fewer staff back then as well. And suddenly, and again, this is a national trend, counseling centers have been facing this increased demand that's hard to keep up with, even in spite of hiring. We've hired quite a few more counselors over the last few years, thankfully, but still the demand increases. And so we're getting creative with how we deliver services. I'm just going to skip. You've probably seen my team. You probably heard about the JED Campus Initiative. This is also a national initiative. Many college campuses across the US are going with the JED Campus Initiative. This helps us really improve the quality of our mental health service delivery and just overall improves campus mental health. Right now we have about 30 or so faculty, staff, and students that meet monthly to help look at our campus mental health initiatives here on Missouri State. And then we have subcommittees working on very specific areas that were identified as needing improvement. It's a 4-year process. And here in about 9 months or so, we're going to give the Healthy Mind Study again. We gave it several years ago, got a baseline of our student mental health. And now we're going to give it again and hopefully see some positive changes in the data. The Counseling Center is changing our model. We have been probably for the last 7 years working with a brief solution focused model, which really helps us meet the demand as best we can. The old-fashioned model, the traditional model is the student can come in, have as many sessions as they want. And some students, you know, would take 15, 20 sessions in a semester, which is more than once a week. And then some students would only take, 2, 3, 5, but it just wasn't sustainable. So we went to a solution focused brief model. Now the trend is that we're going with a stepped care model. However, we're not calling it stepped care. We're calling it personalized care because we don't want students to feel like they have to reach a certain step or wonder if they're at the right step or whatever. Personalized care is really offering them a similar menu, and it looks like this. So this is our new model. They'll come in with that initial screening, which is kind of the hub in the center. And then we're going to recommend various services that they'll be able to utilize. And many of those services are not traditional therapy. Some of them will be online tools, apps that are like self-help therapy modules that they can take on a weekly basis or every other week basis. There's a great program for online support as well, because we know peer support is very important for student success, group therapy, educational workshops, excuse me. And of course, we'll continue with our crisis services and then the specialized therapy and individual therapy for those students that still need that. So when I was looking for information on the impact of mental health on academics and retention, I would say that there's not been a lot of work done on that, but there's been some work done on that. And nationally, 27% of students that receive counseling report academic performance issues. 64%, this is kind of a big one, of college students will drop out within 5 years with mental health problems. Okay, 64% seems pretty strong. 79% of the students that were surveyed say that it's extremely important the faculty and staff have mental health training, which we are trying to do as part of the JED campus program. Here at Missouri State, 45% of the students that come to the counseling center will say that academics is a primary issue for them. And then in our survey, 61% reported that their problems interfered with their ability to conduct their academic work. 24% said, I considered leaving Missouri State because of academic problems. 47% said that the counseling they received helped them stay in school. Okay, that's a big one, right? So we can refer students to the counseling center if they're struggling, because we know it might also not only just help them, but help them remain. And then 67% reported that it contributed to their academic success. Several of the scholarly articles are listed here, but I really want to draw attention to the one that's at the bottom called Investing in Student Mental Health. So pull that up in my notes here. So this was from the Healthy Minds Network. And it was a briefing that was done from a study on student mental health and retention. And the results showed, and this is 2019, so fairly recent. Most of the other studies are older, some as old as 97, but this one's recent. Across all campuses, students with mental health concerns are twice as likely to leave the institution. Okay, pretty strong without graduating. And then a longitudinal dropout study, part of this looked at students with a GPA of less than 3.0, and they found that a quarter of those with mental health problems dropped out, but less than 10% without mental health problems dropped out. So if we're just looking at GPA, it's not enough, right? So we would only identify about 11% of students if we just looked at GPA and dropout risk. If we combine that with mental health and GPA, we would be able to hopefully, potentially assist 30% of those students. Okay. So always be thinking of that as you're working with students. The research really suggests that if we improve student mental health, we can enhance academic performance, persistence, and graduation rates. Okay, I know I'm running short on time. I want to talk briefly about what's recommended from the study. Oh, there was also a really, I found a presentation from the University of Central Florida that actually looked, they took their data from their institution and looked at the students that use the counseling center. Of course, it was all confidential, but they were able to pair that with their data. And they found that, you know, it was beneficial on some level for the students that were able to get counseling, especially with graduate students and transfer students. What they're recommending, okay, from this study, from this briefing, is that we need to better assess our student needs. Things like surveying our students about their mental health needs. And this is something we've done with JED and with the Healthy Mind study that we gave. Informally listen, student forums, include diverse student perspectives. Again, something we're doing with JED. Assess campus existing mental health services, which again is part of the JED program, a deep dive, a deep assessment, and identify the gaps, which is also something we do in the behavioral intervention group, the BIT team. I think that probably everybody, hopefully everybody, does anybody in this room not know about the behavioral intervention team? But we assess students all the time in that group and really try to identify what their needs are. And many of those are mental health. And of course, that's on the rise, right, Dr. Weber? We're seeing a huge increase in mental health concerns through the BIT team. Accessibility. Enhancing accessibility of clinical services, addressing barriers such as the cost of service. Our services are free. The physical location, we moved to majors, so those are some improvements. The volume and type of services available, which has a lot to do with what we're doing with our model change. keeping counseling free, increasing staff, and specifically diverse staff, which we have done. We also have that mental health fee that the students enacted a couple of years ago, which helped us to increase not only our staff, but various services available to students. And then integrate mental health promotion and prevention throughout the entire campus system. Things like suicide prevention, education and awareness, peer support. Our platform is called Together All, that we'll be purchasing for peer support, as well as mental health screenings, technology-based services like WellTrack, which is coming with our change. It's an app with cognitive tools. Faculty and staff and student trainings. You may have heard of You Can Help a Student trainings or You Can Help a Friend trainings. I hope everyone in this room, if you haven't been through a You Can Help a Student training, I hope you will do that at some point. It's on the My Learning Connection. Talk to me more if you have questions about that. Just increasing coping skills and integrating coping skills into the curriculum through like GEP, or offering various opportunities for coping skills in classes, creative partnerships, stakeholders on and off campus, involving them more, and then again, of course, the behavioral intervention team. Those are my references. There's a lot more I could talk about, but we don't have enough time. Are there any questions? Okay, thank you. A little handout on our new model, it just talks about it. Pardon?
Oh, okay. I'll bring them to you. Thank you very much. I promised everybody 20 minutes in our last two presenters. We've had to go a little short, so I'm sorry, guys, but I appreciate you guys being abbreviated. Tara Benson, Dr. Benson was unable to stay. She had a appointment off campus. And so she is going to send a message to the whole group with some bullet points about her slides that are also in the presentation that I've already sent out. And then hopefully we can have her in next year's retreat. But next is Michael Frizzell, Director of Student Learning Services, Dr. Kelly Wood, Associate Provost, and I'll hand it over to them. Thank you.
If you're still online, thanks for hanging with us. And for those of you in the room, as hungry as I am, I've had 3 cups of coffee. I'm shaking. This is going to go through fast. This is going to be great, right? So it's nice to have the Bear Claw included in this, because I think it shows a lot about what's happening behind the scenes. And when I was asked to talk about it, I talked about engagement. I kept thinking, where are students engaging and how does that look? And most of you know what we offer. It's tutoring, writing center consultations, and then embedded tutoring, which is called PASS, course mentoring, supplemental instruction. We've changed that model over the years based on the needs of the university. And so I took a look at that and said, okay, so what does our attendance look like? And then on the back end, I was always curious, what's the impact? And that's the hardest part to measure when it comes to tutoring and success, because I can't draw a direct line that if a student comes into the writing center, worked on a paper, that we retained her long-term, right? I can't draw that direct line, but I could say, okay, maybe, probably, what does the success look like? And so we started to collect data based on first, the system we use to book appointments, and it's called TutorTrack. You don't have access to that. Sorry about that, but I can get you any of those reports you want. If a student comes into the Bear Claw and is recorded in TutorTrack, it ties into Banner, meaning anything that you can collect in Banner, I could cross-reference with our TutorTrack system. So everything from demographics to you're in college, you get the idea. And so before the pandemic, that's what our services were doing. We were just collecting raw numbers, who's coming in, what departments are coming in. And I was using that to target marketing, talk to groups and organizations on campus to drive our numbers, because our numbers are determined by 3 major factors. And the first is availability of services. How many student workers do I have to cover those fields? And whenever our budget gets cut, I protect 2 areas, the writing center and the math center. The math center, you guys are like, well, duh, okay? And obviously that made a lot of sense. But as time has gone on, we started to recognize that wasn't the greatest driver of our numbers. embedded tutoring was. Because the second portion of that was, what is the reference? What do our services feel like to students? And that's when we have a direct contact with a faculty member who says, yeah, you should go. Now that's opposed to when they get the writing center and they're like, I just read your paper and, ooh, you need help. Don't do that, right? I want someone saying the services are good and successful, and we're trusting the student with my students. And so the embedded tutoring became kind of the biggest driver of our numbers. Unfortunately, it was also the most expensive. So when the pandemic hit, we had to shift everything to online, and you will see in my numbers a drastic decrease because ease of access was no longer a factor. They couldn't just walk into the library, look scared, get help, right? They suddenly had to log into a system, go through a clearance, get into a Zoom room, be placed in here. The harder we made it to access that service, the less likely they were to come. And what we're seeing as a direct result afterwards was also the impact is they're slow to return, which many of you have already noted in your programming. We also, you'll see a couple things that happened during the pandemic. We opened a presentation center during the pandemic for COM 115. That was a bad idea the first semester because nobody came, right? But it was there. And what we've noticed is that as long as the services are there and advertised, eventually they start to come back, and you will see a dramatic increase in those numbers. The other thing was changing our supplemental instruction model to a course mentoring model. For those, that's kind of the biggest driver of our numbers that I'm going to show you. So supplemental instruction, or PASS, is embedded tutoring. You get a trusted student who worked with that faculty member and put them back in that classroom like a war journalist, right? And they're sitting there taking notes, and they're working with students and faculty as a trusted student resource. That student then has 3 sessions a week where he or she can work with the students directly on how to study for that course. That model's been tried starting in 1973 by UMKC with great success. It is now a worldwide model that is used. We know from our research that the magic visits, where if you came 5 times, your grades tend to be a quarter step higher than your peers. So we looked at large lecture-based courses where there wasn't a lot of engagement to do that. So if you're thinking, have you tried it in smaller courses? Yes, we tried it in math early on. It was a numbers game. With 25 students, we predicted 10% would attend, and that's exactly what happened. So we had 2.5 students per session, and you knew who the half was. It just wasn't working out, right? And so when we started looking at things like DMS 308, with 300 and 400 students, suddenly we were getting 30 and 40 students or more per section. So that made more sense, more bang for our buck. So the major changes that we made during the pandemic was we went to video conferencing. We made the Writing Center available by email instead of simply walking in and getting help. We created a presentation center, and our PASS switched to course mentoring, where the student worker no longer attended the course, but was available, which meant I needed faculty support to market the program, because out of sight, out of mind, they will not come. What happened next? So if you look at fall 17 to fall 18, these were some of our bigger years. You can see in the fall, we had about 9,000 visits, and then increased about 9,700 visits. These are raw visits. So if a student walked in and met with one of my student workers, we counted that as a visit. If it was 15 minutes to look at your thesis statement or an hour to suffer through algebra, that's what it was, right? Fall to fall and spring to spring are the best ways for me to kind of predict on how things will go for the year. And that's obvious, right? Fall, students seem to be more motivated after 3 months off. They're suddenly ready to kind of get engaged. Faculty are also more engaged. There's a lot more assignments coming out. It's a different population using the Bear Claw than would otherwise in the spring. So it makes a lot of sense. We don't count a lot of summer data because we don't do a lot of programming in the summer. Then we started to draw down the PASS program, and you can see that number dropped dramatically from before, where we had 4,000 suddenly to 379 because I had 2 classes. Okay. And the reason that we were drawing it down was that I was running out of money We had to support math and writing. That was always been the priority. So suddenly I had to overstaff these other areas. And then the pandemic hit and Cliff calls me and says, hey, you need to do something that's going to be dynamic enough and connect these students. So we tried to reach out. But in addition to that, our numbers were cut because if you'll recall, we had to let go all hourly workers and staff those positions with graduate students who didn't have an assignment. So I had to train the graduate students over the weekend and went, God be with you, and here we go. And of course, since it was hard for students to access, it's all online, and it was an untrained staff who they didn't know, our numbers plummeted dramatically. And so if you take a look at our breakdown over the years, you can see we dropped with the past program, when we drew it down, we dropped almost 4,000 students from our rosters. In 2020, we went down 2,000 in the fall. And then 2021, we started to crawl back up with 1,200 more from before. And so I started to ask other directors across the country, what are you seeing in your learning centers? And I'm president of the National College Learning Center Association. And monthly, we have monthly meetings where other presidents and directors get together and we go, what's happening? And everywhere across the country is seeing the same problem. Students are not accessing student support despite mental health issues where they're saying it's higher, there's a lot more anxiety. 45% was her number of those who come in who struggle with academics. They're still not returning to that service. My theory early on was they're going to faculty because faculty are more engaged now because they're online and their emails. And then faculty said, oh yeah, that's cute, thank you. But no, they're not coming here either. So where are they going? They're just doing it on their own. And we've got to, Google searches, anything that they can do, we've got to find a way. When you look at spring to spring, you can see that how the engagement impact is quite different. In 2018, we had about 8,000 students, and then 2019, about 8,391. We were on track to probably having 10,000 plus visits a semester at this point, and you could see that just dramatically increasing. This is a far cry from when I took over the Writing Center, 2014, when I think in 2009, we had 750 students.
You didn't realize you were that old?
No, I'm freaking old. All right, so in 2020, we drew down the course mentoring program, and then we started to build back up. So what's that look like as a snapshot? Well, 2020, we dropped 6,300 appointments. That is a huge impact on what we were doing. It made staffing a challenge. So just looking at our data, what in the world or how in the world are Diana and I then supposed to hire tutors? Who are we supposed to support? Where would that come from? So I've been relying a lot on faculty to tell me, what are you seeing? Because sometimes the data doesn't always tell us the whole story, right? Students were telling me that they just wanted the support, but they didn't really know how to ask for it anymore. High school students who now were online for almost 2 years were suddenly entering our system with no way to ask for the help that they need, which is a huge challenge for us because I don't have any marketing dollars. I've got to get out there and be on my own to do these presentations. So what I started to do is I asked computer services to help build a retention tool, some kind of model that we can say, I just want to know if a student walked into the center, what's her chances of being retained? That's all I want to know. And then I wanted to be able to break it down. And they said, yeah, Michael, that's all you want to know. It took me 2 years to build. Okay. And I was telling Kelly before we did this, I'm so afraid to show you this data because I don't know where it came from. I didn't build it myself. So I have to trust the computer services was right. And I just took a small snapshot of what we're doing. And I chose health and human services, BMS, kinesthesiology, nursing, and psychology, because they were some of our larger heavy hitters in certain areas. Biomedical sciences uses our course mentoring program a lot more than most. BMS 110, 230, 231, 307, 308. So since those were drivers of a lot of our course mentoring embedded tutoring numbers, I chose them. Psychology is our heaviest hitter in the Writing Center. You guys would think, isn't that English? There's not enough of them, right? I really need the psychology numbers to drive that. And this is just raw data, but it shows you right now, if the department comes in with what their retention rate was, and then if they came to the Bear Claw, yes. If they never attended, no, and what the difference was. And it was wildly all over the place. It's all over the place. And sometimes we do better than the average for the department, and sometimes we do not. And what drives that? If I were to drill down even further, that's my staffing levels again. If I've got more tutors in a certain area, it covers it and it drives the numbers up, obviously, right? So this is fall to fall, because that was the easiest way to do it. And you can look at the 2020 to 2021 to kind of show you what the impact was for the pandemic. Now, if you're interested in this data, it is available in Argos, and it drills all the way down to section number in your department, which I thought was pretty cool. But I needed that data for the embedded tutoring to ensure. I haven't found very many other schools that do it this way, but I wanted to get an overall picture because the way that we look at tutoring here at Missouri State is it's extremely faculty driven. Of all of the data that I collect, the reports I get from students tell me 75% of those who use the Bear Claw were referred by a faculty member. 75%. That is a huge number. It's not because they saw me, doing my song and dance at SOAR. It's not because I got a flyer or a magnet in the dorm room. We're doing all of those things. It was because a faculty member said, yeah, you ought to check it out. So the Bear Claw data is interesting in, I think it shows you first the impact of the pandemic. And then when you tie it in with the mental health portion and the enrollment portion, you start to see where students are just sluggish to return to those services. So what does that hold for the future for me? I'm not sure. Right now, Kelly and I have been in some discussions about maybe looking at embedded tutoring over other types of tutoring that we're doing. Tutoring on demand isn't always the best model because we are extremely reactive. It's hard to predict what the next semester will hold in tutoring. But if students say, well, I'm having problems here, I don't get census data for another year, then suddenly I've got to figure out how that staffing is going to look in the future. That's not the best optimal way to do it. It is the way we have. So when I start thinking about what would I like to do in the future, I think expanding course mentoring, embedding more tutors, working closer with faculty members to ensure that we're reaching the students we need to reach. So this is my portion. I'm going to turn it over to Kelly, but if you want any of this data, feel free to email me or message me and I can send you the full report for your department, even your class. Thanks.
I won't go over all the other slides. You've already received, I think, a copy of the slides, but this is an example of data that we would like to include in our tracking of retention predictors as well. As important because it can help us get some messages out about using the Bear Claw and increasing your likelihood of staying in school and getting the help that you need, but also the importance of course mentoring and the value of peer-to-peer instruction is very important. So just to give you a heads up, so other forms of data. So one is the Bear Claw data that we can use. We can also look at questions like, do you plan to return in the next semester? We got this from the Bears Care survey previously. And then we can look at, did students return? Did they register? So these are other types of data. And I want to share with you really briefly the Title III grant. This involved coaching to students who were first gens who started last fall. So I'm going to jump from there to a little bit of data that we pulled together, looking at how many times did you meet with a coach and what was that impact on your GPA. So I like the message that came out of this, which was meet with your coach and improve your GPA 0.2 to 0.3 points. That was just for that group of students who were participating. That can mean a lot to students. Oh, I can improve my GPA by going to a coach, absolutely. But then also you can decrease your chances of being on probation or suspension by working with one of our success coaches. So these are the types of data that we're using also, and that we want to put into the mix for understanding what are predictors of students retaining. You've gotten a lot of information today about that. You know, I think the connection that we made to those student profiles from the data that Teresa shared, Bear Claw data, student engagement data, data from the counseling center, student engagement data, which we didn't get a chance to talk about, but these are all ways for us to understand, once we have students here, how are we keeping them engaged and what are activities that they're participating in to keep them focused on their work here and meeting their goals and ours as well. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Rob, and he gets the pleasure of trying to finish this out.
Okay, thanks for sticking with us. Yeah, thanks. Kelly and Michael, appreciate that. So thanks for sticking with us. I know we went a few minutes over time. So we have some resources that you can go to that were pointed out in this presentation. Again, the presentation was emailed out. It's already on the SEM website, and then the recording of Zoom will be posted pretty soon on the SEM website as well. Would welcome any feedback if you want to email me as we prepare in a while for next year's annual SEM data retreat. But again, thanks for being here. Hope you have a good rest of the day. Don't get too wet out there. Bye.